Welcome to a quiet corner of thought, where words drift slower than breath and meaning hides between the still moments. Tonight, we step into the soft rhythm of human connection, the silent dance that happens before a single word is spoken. In this calm, invisible exchange, our bodies whisper truths our minds have yet to shape. It's here, in the echo of movement and posture, that the art of mirroring begins. You've seen it before. Two people talking, unaware that their gestures fall in sync, their breaths align, their heads tilt at the same angle. It feels effortless, natural, even tender. But beneath that simplicity lies something ancient, something wired deep within the brain, a language older than speech, capable of building trust, dissolving tension, or quietly steering emotion. When two people interact, their bodies begin to tune to one another. A lean, a tilt, a folded arm. Each gesture invites an echo. We mirror to show safety, to say, "I understand," without letting words get in the way. It isn't a trick or a conscious performance. It's a reflection of empathy. When someone sits back, we might lean back too. When they cross an arm, our shoulders relax in kind. These small shared rhythms create an invisible bridge between two nervous systems. The mind senses familiarity and softens its guard. Suddenly, conversation feels effortless, as if you've known the other person for years. In science, this response begins with mirror neurons, tiny cells in the brain that fire both when we act and when we observe others acting. They are the biological roots of empathy, the reason you wince when someone stubs their toe or smile when a friend laughs. Mirroring body language taps directly into this primal system. When gestures align, emotions align. What was once me and you begins to blur into us. In that shared rhythm, trust grows quietly, without either person noticing. Think of the moments when tension softens without a word. In a difficult meeting, one person relaxes their shoulders, and seconds later, the other follows. The shift spreads like calm rippling across still water. Or picture two strangers meeting for the first time. At first guarded, their postures stiff, but soon, their gestures begin to mirror unconsciously. A nod, a hand resting on the table, a shared smile. It's as if their bodies have agreed to listen before their minds have. This is the essence of connection, the physical echo that builds rapport before logic takes its turn. In professional settings, subtle mirroring can turn conflict into cooperation. A negotiator who reflects another's posture or breathing patterns signals harmony. The effect isn't dominance, it's alignment. When the other person feels seen, resistance fades, but mirroring must remain gentle, almost invisible. Imitation that feels forced becomes mockery. The beauty of this technique lies in restraint, the quiet art of reflecting energy, not copying motion. Imagine a tense discussion across a desk. One person sits rigid, arms crossed. Instead of copying that tension, the listener keeps their posture open, calm. Over time, the energy shifts. The rigid shoulders drop. The arms unfold. The listener then subtly mirrors that change. A shared breath, a mirrored lean forward. Without realizing why, both people feel understood. The mirror becomes a bridge, not a mask. In personal relationships, mirroring becomes more intimate. When a loved one is sad, their posture speaks louder than their words. Sitting beside them, adopting their gentle slump or resting your head as they do, can wordlessly say, "I'm with you." It's a gesture of quiet empathy. Later, when your posture slowly lifts, theirs follows, guided by the rhythm you've shared. No advice, no correction, just presence. The emotional shift happens naturally because the body leads where the mind hesitates. But mirroring isn't boundless. Context shapes everything. A gesture that feels warm in one culture may seem strange or even disrespectful in another. In some societies, leaning forward signals interest. In others, it invades space. The art lies in observation. Begin neutral. Match tone before you match gesture. Start with breath, the oldest form of rhythm shared between humans. When you breathe at their pace, your voice follows, your expressions soften, and the connection deepens organically. Still, there are moments when mirroring should be avoided, especially when emotion runs hot. Reflecting anger can escalate conflict. If someone clenches their fists, mirroring that fury only builds fire. Instead, match their emotional intensity, not their movement. Keep your tone grounded, your stance open. Meet their storm with calm gravity. Over time, they'll subconsciously mirror you instead. It's not control, it's gentle guidance. Mirroring is also a tool of teaching. A good mentor reflects not only a student's actions but their pace of learning. When a teacher leans closer as a student struggles or tilts their head in shared curiosity, understanding flows more easily. The student feels supported, never judged. This is the quiet magic of reflection. It says, "We're in this together." Even in silence, mirroring thrives. Two friends sitting quietly might begin to match their breathing, their stillness, their subtle movements. It's as if their bodies have found a single, shared heartbeat. In those moments, connection transcends conversation. It becomes something you feel, not think. Yet this simple act, this barely noticeable mimicry, can ripple outward into powerful change. In workplaces, it smooths disagreements. In families, it eases unspoken pain. In strangers, it builds brief, beautiful bridges of understanding. The next time you find yourself in conversation, watch closely. Notice how your body moves when they move, how your breath finds theirs. If you do it with care, with empathy rather than intent, you'll discover something remarkable. You won't just be heard, you'll be felt, because at the heart of every connection, beneath all the noise and words, our bodies remember the oldest language of all: reflection. Using their name often. A name carries a quiet kind of gravity. It's one of the first sounds we ever learn to recognize, and one of the few that can still turn our attention instantly, no matter where we are. Long before language became complex, before we could weave stories or explanations, a name was identity, a small sound that meant you. It was the thread that tethered a person to the world. Even now, in the noise of our daily lives, that same sound still has the power to cut through distraction and find us. When someone says your name in conversation, something happens deep in the brain. Attention narrows, heartbeat slows, and awareness sharpens. For just a moment, the world fades and the self wakes up. That single word becomes a signal. I see you. I'm speaking to you. You matter here. In that recognition, trust begins to form. It's subtle, but profound. In quiet psychology, using a person's name is one of the most graceful ways to guide emotion and focus. You don't have to raise your voice or demand attention. Just speaking the name creates an invisible bridge between minds. It's like lighting a candle in the middle of conversation. The flame may be small, but it draws every eye. Picture a meeting where several people are talking. Ideas overlap, voices rise and fall. Amid that rhythm, one person looks directly at another and says their name before speaking. The room shifts. The sound feels personal, like an invitation into stillness. The listener's focus returns instantly because the name tells them that what comes next belongs to them. No command was given, yet the effect is complete. The secret lies in balance. A name used sparingly feels sincere. Used too often, it can sound mechanical or manipulative. The art is in timing. Beginning a conversation with a name to establish warmth, slipping it naturally into the middle to keep connection, and closing with it so the listener feels seen as the moment ends. Like a heartbeat at the start, middle, and end of a sentence. Consider how this works in everyday life. When you greet a friend with, "Hey," it's casual. But when you say, "Hey, Sarah," it softens something invisible. It changes the rhythm of sound and emotion. It reminds the other person of their own humanness, that they're not just one face among many. The moment becomes personal. In leadership and communication, this principle deepens trust. A teacher who says, "Well done, Ethan," makes praise tangible. A mentor who begins feedback with, "I know you tried your best, Maria," turns criticism into care. A name anchors emotion, giving weight to what follows. Without it, words drift like wind, heard but not felt. Even in conflict, names act as quiet de-escalators. When voices rise and arguments tangle, calling someone by name cuts through the chaos. It reminds them that they are not being attacked, only addressed. A simple, "Listen, James," can slow anger faster than 1,000 explanations. It rehumanizes the moment, transforming confrontation into conversation. In relationships, the use of a name can soften distance. Lovers use nicknames not just out of habit, but to reaffirm closeness. Parents call their children by name to draw them back from wandering attention. Friends use each other's names in laughter, in comfort, in small gestures of recognition. Every time, it carries a pulse of warmth. I know who you are, and I'm here with you. The brain responds to names with surprising intensity. Neurological studies show that hearing your own name activates regions tied to emotion and self-perception. It's like touching a sensitive chord within. Even in a crowded space, Full of chatter, that single sound finds you. The cocktail party effect. You might not register the noise around you, but your name will still pierce through, quiet but undeniable. Writers and storytellers have long understood this power. When a character says another's name before a confession, it amplifies the meaning. I love you is one thing. I love you, Elena, is something else entirely. The name pins the feeling to a person. It makes the emotion real, specific, and unforgettable. In business, this subtle truth becomes a tool of connection. A speaker who remembers a client's name instantly earns respect. A customer service worker who ends a call with, "Thank you, Mr. Khan," leaves a lasting impression of care. People don't remember every detail of what was said, but they always remember how they were made to feel. And names are the doorway to that memory. The use of names can also be a mirror for power dynamics. When a superior addresses someone by their first name while expecting to be called sir or ma'am, the hierarchy becomes clear. But when both sides exchange names equally, equality blooms. The sound of a name bridges distance, collapsing the invisible gap between you and me. Even written communication feels emptier without it. An email that begins, "Hello," feels neutral, but one that starts, "Hello, Jordan," feels alive. It creates an instant pulse of warmth, a reminder that the message was meant for you, not anyone else. Small, but meaningful. The difference between information and intention. Of course, names carry emotion, and emotion remembers tone. A harshly spoken name can wound, a soft one can heal. The same word can mean warning, love, or loss depending on how it's said. Think of the way your name sounds when whispered kindly versus when shouted across a room. It's the same letters, yet the energy changes everything. This is why saying a name should never be rushed. It's not just sound, it's recognition. Using someone's name too early or too often in conversation can feel strategic. The true skill lies in subtlety, to make it sound natural, almost accidental, as if the name simply belongs in the flow of speech. You aren't reminding them of who they are, you're reminding them that you're truly speaking to them. Sometimes, saying nothing but their name is enough. When words fail in moments of grief, joy, or awe, a name becomes both anchor and comfort. It says, "I know you, I see you, I'm still here." In that single sound lies connection beyond language. So the next time you speak, pause before you call someone by name. Feel the weight of it, let it mean something. Because that one simple word, the sound of identity, carries the entire story of who a person is and how you choose to meet them. When used with care, names don't just identify, they invite. They open doors to trust, soften hearts, and turn conversations into moments that linger. In the quiet psychology of connection, few things are more powerful than hearing your own name spoken gently by another soul. Repeating. They're key words. Every conversation holds a rhythm, a pulse hidden beneath the words. When two people speak, they exchange more than sentences. They pass emotions, fragments of memory, and subtle invitations for understanding. Yet most of the time we respond too quickly. We fill the quiet with our own thoughts, our own need to be heard. But the secret to deep connection lies not in speaking more. It lies in reflecting what has already been said. Repeating someone's key words is like holding up a mirror that speaks. It tells the other person, "I hear you. I see what matters most in what you just said." It's one of the simplest, most gentle techniques in human communication, and yet one of the most powerful. Imagine sitting across from someone who's been carrying a quiet burden. Their voice trembles slightly as they say, "I just feel overwhelmed lately." You don't rush to give advice. You don't interrupt. You simply repeat softly, "Overwhelmed." That single word, returned like an echo, opens a door. It tells their nervous system that they've been heard. The person exhales. They start explaining, unraveling, revealing the thoughts behind that word. And all you did was reflect it back. Human beings are wired to crave recognition. When our words return to us, it's like hearing our thoughts from outside ourselves. Clearer, more real. It validates us in ways even empathy alone cannot. Because empathy says, "I understand you." Reflection says, "I feel this with you." This quiet technique is one of the foundations of effective therapy, negotiation, and even friendship. It slows the pace of conversation and draws attention to what truly matters. People rarely speak in perfectly organized ideas. They scatter clues in their sentences. When you pick up those clues and give them back, you help them see their own story more clearly. Consider a moment in conflict. Someone says, "You never listen to me." Most people respond defensively, "That's not true." But the person who pauses, takes a breath, and simply says, "You feel like I don't listen." That repetition changes everything. It takes the heat out of the moment. It replaces resistance with acknowledgement. The other person doesn't have to fight anymore to be heard. They already have been. This is the paradox of repetition. Saying less creates space for others to say more. The echo invites expansion. It allows silence to do the heavy lifting. You can test this in any conversation. Listen closely for the words someone emphasizes. Maybe they say trust, pressure, or balance. Those are the anchors of their emotions. Repeat one back at the right moment, and you'll see their posture shift. Their eyes soften, or focus more intently. They'll feel the weight of being understood without you explaining a single thing. In professional environments, this technique turns dialogue into collaboration. Imagine a team member saying, "We just don't have enough time to finish." Instead of offering immediate solutions, a calm, "Time is tight, huh?" keeps the conversation open. It draws the focus deeper into the core of the problem. Often, that's when the truth spills out. Yes, and it's not just time. It's that we keep changing direction. You've uncovered something real simply by repeating 2 words. Repetition works because it softens the ego. It's not mimicry, it's attunement. When someone feels mirrored, they drop their defenses. Their brain no longer treats you as an opponent, but as an ally. This reaction is ancient, biological. The brain's limbic system, responsible for emotion and trust, responds to linguistic harmony like music. When words align, so do feelings. In relationships, repeating key words builds emotional intimacy. Picture 2 people sitting together late at night, one sharing a fear, "I'm just afraid of losing control." The other replies gently, "Losing control?" That echo isn't a question. It's a bridge. The first person nods, the walls fall, and the conversation deepens. Sometimes that's all people need. Not advice, not rescue, but reflection. Still, like all forms of subtle communication, repetition demands balance. If you echo too much, it sounds rehearsed, even manipulative. The magic fades when the rhythm becomes too obvious. The secret is to listen, not perform. Choose only the words that carry emotion, the ones that linger a little longer in the air after they've been spoken. Repetition is also a window into hidden meaning. People often disguise truth behind small phrases. A person might say, "It's fine, I guess." Repeating, "You guess?" gently asks them to reveal the feeling beneath the mask. They might smile, then sigh, and say, "No, it's not fine." That's the moment honesty begins. This skill can turn even brief encounters into moments of connection. In casual conversation, repeating someone's phrase shows attentiveness. It turns strangers into participants in the same rhythm of speech. The small mirroring of words, not tone, not body, just language, builds a pattern of trust that feels effortless. In teaching, repeating a student's keywords helps reinforce understanding. A learner who says, "I don't get this part," might hear, "This part?" and realize exactly where they're stuck. It's a guiding light, not through explanation, but through reflection. There's also beauty in how repetition slows down the world. We live in constant rush, to respond, to be right, to move on. Echoing someone's words forces stillness. It turns ordinary dialogue into a meditation. In that stillness, people reveal things they didn't know they were holding. The technique also serves as a form of emotional regulation. When you repeat someone's words calmly, you subtly lower their emotional temperature. It's a mirror of peace. Their breathing steadies, their voice softens, and soon they begin to mirror you too. Not just in words, but in energy. What began as conflict becomes understanding, and what began as noise becomes clarity. Even silence works beautifully with this method. After repeating a key word, pause. Let the echo hang in the air. The pause gives the other person permission to go deeper, as if you've handed them a space to fill with truth. In that space, honesty grows. The reason this works so well is that repetition communicates more than attention. It communicates care. It says, "I'm listening closely enough to notice what matters most to you." It's a rare kind of listening, one that asks nothing in return. There's an almost spiritual simplicity in it. You become less of a participant and more of a witness. A mirror reflecting someone else's thoughts back to them until they find their own answers. And when they do, they'll remember not what you said, but how you made them feel seen. In a world where conversations often compete for space, this act of gentle reflection feels sacred. It slows time. It turns noise into meaning. It reminds people that their words have value and that someone, somewhere, is truly listening. So next time someone speaks, resist the urge to fill the silence. Listen for the word that vibrates slightly louder than the rest, the one that carries weight. Then return it to them softly, like a calm echo in a quiet room. That's where trust begins. That's where walls fall. Because sometimes you don't need to say much at all. You just need to reflect the sound of their truth until they hear it too. Agreeing before introducing an idea. Words can heal and words can divide. Yet between agreement and disagreement lies a space most people forget. A quiet bridge built from understanding. Before you can change a mind, you must first meet it where it already stands. There is an old truth in communication, one so simple that it often goes unnoticed. People listen best when they feel heard first. To agree, even briefly, before introducing your own idea is not submission. It's synchronization. It's the art of aligning before steering, of harmonizing before leading. When someone feels you understand their world, their walls fall away. Their defenses, once rigid, soften. And suddenly, what once felt like a battle of opinions becomes a shared exploration of thought. Agreement, in its purest form, is the language of openness. Picture a conversation between two people who see things differently. One says, "I just think people are too sensitive these days." Most would respond by countering the idea immediately. "No, people just want to be respected." The debate begins and both sides tighten. But the listener who begins with, "I get what you mean. It does feel like things have changed a lot lately," creates stillness. In that stillness, curiosity replaces conflict. The speaker feels seen, not attacked. Then, with the tension eased, the listener can continue. But maybe that sensitivity is also helping people feel safer to speak. That gentle structure, agreement first, then redirection, is one of the oldest psychological tools in persuasion and connection. It builds rapport faster than logic ever could. Because the human mind doesn't open under pressure, it opens under understanding. At its core, this technique speaks to a deeper truth about human nature. We seek resonance. We want to feel that our thoughts matter, that someone else can see the world through our eyes, even briefly. Agreement signals that resonance. It tells the other person, you're not alone in what you feel. And from that foundation, you can gently invite them toward a new idea. Think of it like walking beside someone on a path. You don't shout from a distance for them to change direction. You walk beside them, matching their pace, until the moment feels right to point toward a new road. They're more likely to follow because you've walked their way first. In negotiation, this principle becomes powerful. The most skilled negotiators know that persuasion doesn't start with argument. It starts with empathy. When you restate and agree with part of what someone says, you create a psychological mirror. It calms the primitive part of the brain that sees disagreement as danger. Once calmness returns, reason becomes possible. The agreement doesn't need to be complete or absolute. Even partial agreement can soften resistance. "You're right, deadlines are tough," or "I see why that would frustrate you," are small acknowledgements that can change the tone of a discussion entirely. After that moment of validation, the listener is ready for new input. In relationships, this method can transform misunderstandings into healing. When a partner says, "You never have time for me," most people defend, "That's not true, I've been busy." But starting with agreement changes the energy. "You're right, I've been distant lately." Suddenly the tone shifts from confrontation to connection. Once they feel heard, they become open to dialogue. What follows isn't a fight, but a bridge. Let's find a way to make more time. It's not manipulation. It's emotional intelligence. Agreement before introduction is a form of respect. It says, "Your feelings are valid, even if I see things differently." That acknowledgement is the difference between resistance and receptivity. In leadership, this principle builds loyalty. When a leader says, "You make a great point," before offering a new idea, they create psychological alignment. The team feels included in the thought process, not overridden by authority. The result is collaboration instead of compliance. Even in teaching, agreeing before introducing an idea helps learners stay open. A student might say, "This topic feels impossible." A teacher who replies, "It does seem tough at first," honors the emotion. Then they can add, "But once you see the pattern, it becomes much easier. Agreement meets emotion, explanation meets logic. Together, they unlock understanding. This pattern is rooted deeply in the brain's design. When we sense disagreement, our fight or flight system activates. The amygdala lights up, and our body prepares for defense. But when we sense agreement, serotonin and oxytocin, the chemicals of calm and connection, rise. The body relaxes and the mind reopens. Only then does learning or persuasion truly happen. It's a form of emotional aikido, using the energy of resistance not to fight back, but to guide. You're not overpowering another's perspective. You're redirecting it gently toward clarity. Even in storytelling, this concept appears again and again. The best narratives begin by agreeing with the audience's worldview, showing them a familiar truth before revealing a deeper one. A story that begins with understanding invites people to follow it anywhere. However, sincerity is crucial. Empty agreement feels manipulative, and people sense it instantly. True agreement must reflect genuine empathy, even if it's only for the emotion behind the statement, not the logic of it. "I understand why you'd feel that way," is often more authentic than "you're absolutely right." The technique isn't about surrendering your opinion. It's about creating a safe space where both truths can coexist. From that safety, transformation naturally arises. You can practice this daily in the smallest exchanges. When someone says, "This weather is awful," you might smile and say, "It really has been rough lately." That tiny moment of agreement smooths energy. Later you might add, "Though I kind of love how quiet it makes the city." The transition feels natural because it began with harmony. Over time, you'll notice a shift in how people respond to you. They'll speak more openly, listen more patiently, and even seek your input, not because you agree with everything they say, but because they feel safe when you do speak. That safety is the invisible foundation of influence. True agreement is not submission of thought, it's mastery of connection. It's the pause before persuasion, the calm before the turn. And like most powerful forms of communication, it works quietly, invisible, but unmistakable in its impact. When you agree before introducing an idea, you remind people that every opinion, every feeling, deserves to be seen before it's guided. You make understanding a prerequisite for influence. And perhaps in doing so, you become something rarer than persuasive. You become trusted. Because in the end, the goal isn't to win an argument. It's to meet another mind halfway and walk forward together. Maintaining prolonged eye contact. There is a silence that exists between two pairs of eyes. A silence more eloquent than any spoken language. It is the pause where words dissolve and truth begins. The eyes, after all, are not just organs of sight. They are instruments of emotion, translating the unspoken with terrifying precision. To hold eye contact is to stand unguarded before another soul. It's to expose something we can't hide behind smiles or posture. The realness that flickers behind our every thought. For some, this is a comfort. For others, it feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, wind rushing past, heart racing. Because eye contact, when sustained, becomes intimate. And intimacy, in its truest sense, is vulnerability. When you look into someone's eyes for longer than comfort allows, you enter a space that words cannot decorate. You begin to feel rather than interpret. Emotions, intentions, fears, they all rise to the surface. It's why prolonged eye contact can feel electric, even haunting. It awakens the mind's quietest senses, demanding honesty. Humans have evolved to use the eyes as emotional compasses. In every conversation, we glance for cues: trust, fear, affection, deceit. Our ancestors read safety in the gaze of the tribe and danger in the unflinching stare of the predator. Today, though the world has changed, the instinct remains. The eyes still decide whether we approach or withdraw, trust or doubt, open or close. In modern psychology, maintaining eye contact signals confidence and sincerity. A person who can look another in the eyes without aggression communicates calm authority. They appear composed, trustworthy, and present. But the secret lies not in staring, but in balance. The delicate dance between presence and pressure. Imagine speaking to someone whose eyes wander constantly. It's difficult to connect. Their gaze drifts past you, and with it, your sense of importance. Now picture another person who meets your eyes and holds them gently, unhurried. You feel acknowledged, seen in a way that quiets the noise inside your head. That moment, brief yet powerful, roots the entire exchange in trust. Prolonged eye contact also slows time. It forces both parties into awareness of breath, of silence, of self. You can feel your heartbeat, your posture, the small tremors of vulnerability that come from being truly observed. In that stillness, communication deepens. Because when two people share eye contact without filling the space with words, the truth hidden beneath conversation starts to emerge. But there is a fine line between presence and dominance. A gaze too sharp becomes a weapon, too long, and it feels like control. The art of eye contact lies in softness. The ability to hold someone's gaze, not to overpower them, but to share a moment of genuine recognition. It's not about looking through someone, but into them, and allowing them to look back. In intimate relationships, this kind of connection becomes sacred. Lovers who meet eyes across a quiet room can communicate entire sentences without a sound. Parents and children do the same. A shared look can express comfort, disapproval, or pride. Even friendships are deepened through this silent understanding. Eye contact is a mirror where emotion becomes visible. In conflict, it becomes even more powerful. Maintaining calm, steady eye contact during tension shows composure. It tells the other person, I'm here, I'm not attacking, I'm listening. When done with warmth, not aggression, it softens even the most heated exchanges. The other person, sensing calm rather than threat, begins to regulate their own energy. The storm quiets, not through words, but through the simple constancy of your gaze. Actors and leaders often train to master this. They know that when you speak while keeping eye contact, your words feel grounded. Audiences listen not just because of what's being said, but because of how it's anchored. A speech delivered without eye contact drifts like wind. With it, every word carries weight. The eyes make meaning land. But beyond communication, there is something profoundly human about looking and being looked at. Eye contact reminds us that consciousness exists in another being, mirroring our own. It is the closest thing to touching souls, and for that reason, it can be terrifying. We are accustomed to masks, to hiding behind expressions and distractions. The gaze strips all that away. If you've ever looked into someone's eyes for longer than a few seconds, really looked, you know the strange shift that occurs. At first it's observation, then discomfort, then something unexpected, calm. You begin to sense the other person's humanity, and in that, your own. The borders between I and you blur slightly, replaced by a soft recognition that we are not as separate as we think. In therapy sessions, prolonged eye contact can bring deep breakthroughs. The client may speak a truth they've long buried, simply because the therapist's gaze does not waver. It says, you are safe enough to be seen. In teaching, it encourages attention. In leadership, it demands respect without aggression. And in love, it transforms silence into understanding. But for eye contact to work its quiet magic, it must come from presence, not performance. If your mind is elsewhere, the gaze becomes hollow. People can feel that emptiness instantly. They sense the difference between being watched and being seen. There's a rhythm to it, a pulse. You hold the gaze, then look away just enough to breathe, to give the other person space. Then you return, soft but steady. It's a dance, connection, release, return. Done right, it feels effortless. Done wrong, it feels suffocating. In spiritual traditions, eye contact has long been seen as a portal, a way of recognizing divinity in another person. In some meditation practices, two people sit facing each other in silence, eyes meeting without speaking. Within minutes, emotions rise to the surface. Laughter, tears, peace. The eyes, it seems, dissolve pretense and reveal truth faster than words ever could. Even animals understand this language. A dog's steady gaze toward its owner expresses trust. Too much direct eye contact between unfamiliar dogs, however, signals challenge. Nature itself uses the gaze as a bridge and a boundary, a delicate balance of vulnerability and respect. In our digital world, where eyes meet more often through screens than in person, this kind of connection has become rare, and therefore even more powerful. When you give someone your full attention, when your eyes remain undistracted and patient, you offer them something precious, presence. And presence, in a world that thrives on distraction, is the purest form of love. So, maintain eye contact, not as a tactic, but as a truth. Let it be your way of saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm with you. Let it last just long enough for the other person to feel seen, not studied. Let it soften rather than pierce, soothe rather than dominate. Because the eyes, when used gently, remind us that behind every conversation, every difference, every guarded word, there is simply one human soul searching for recognition in another. Hold that gaze long enough, and you'll see it. The quiet realization that for a brief, fragile moment, you are no longer strangers. Positioning yourself higher, every interaction carries a current, unseen but deeply felt. In every room, every meeting, every relationship, there's a quiet question being asked beneath the words. Who leads the energy here? You can feel it without needing to say it. Sometimes one person's tone steadies the room. Their presence feels grounded, their posture composed, their energy centered. Without forcing it, they become the anchor. Others, without realizing it, begin to align with that calm. This is not about control or arrogance. It's about positioning, a subtle awareness of how presence shapes perception. To position yourself higher does not mean towering above others. It means holding your energy steady enough that others rise to meet it. It is less about height and more about grounding, knowing who you are so fully that the space around you adjusts naturally. Body language is the visible architecture of confidence. The human mind interprets posture as emotion long before words arrive. Shoulders slightly back, chin relaxed, spine lifted. These are the signals of self-assurance. They tell the world, I am safe within myself, and safety is magnetic. People are drawn to it. Think of how leaders walk into a room. They don't rush, they don't shrink. They move as though the air itself parts gently to make room. That quiet grace has nothing to do with dominance. It's rhythm. A higher position begins in stillness, not in force. In any group, there is an unspoken hierarchy of energy. Those who appear calm, centered, and observant naturally occupy the higher ground. This doesn't mean superiority, it means steadiness. It's the same dynamic seen in nature. The mountain does not chase the wind. It simply stands, and the weather passes around it. When you physically position yourself slightly higher, standing while others sit, or speaking from a raised level, you immediately alter the psychological landscape of the moment. The mind, trained by centuries of instinct, associates height with authority. But height without humility becomes threat. Height with empathy becomes guidance. Imagine a conversation between a teacher and a student. The teacher bends slightly to the student's level, softening the power gap while maintaining gentle authority. The message isn't I am above you, but I am guiding you. That small adjustment turns hierarchy into mentorship. In professional spaces, even seating matters. The one who sits where they can see the room, who controls light and angle subtly, influences the rhythm of discussion. A chair slightly elevated or positioned at the head of the table gives a psychological sense of command. Yet true power is invisible. It's not in the chair, but in the calm that fills it. To position yourself higher emotionally is to rise above reaction. When tension fills a conversation, most people mirror it. Voices tighten, words sharpen. But the person who remains composed, who listens longer, breathes slower, ascends without moving. They lift the entire conversation just by refusing to descend into chaos. The mind is contagious. Anxiety spreads quickly, but so does peace. By staying grounded when others lose their balance, you become the still point others instinctively orbit around. That's what it means to hold a higher position. Not to control, but to stabilize. This dynamic plays out even in silence. Watch how groups naturally turn toward whoever maintains calm eye contact, open posture, and slow gestures. That's where authority quietly gathers, not in words, but in gravity. There's also a physical truth to positioning. Standing slightly taller expands the lungs, deepens breath, and lowers stress hormones. The body informs the mind. As posture lifts, so does presence. Confidence is not a thought, it's a shape. But there's an art to balancing height with warmth. A person who uses their elevated position to intimidate creates fear, not respect. Their presence silences voices instead of inspiring them. True authority invites expression. It makes others feel safe enough to rise too. When someone kneels beside a child to speak, they aren't lowering themselves. They're showing that real strength adapts. Power that bends doesn't break. To position yourself higher means knowing when to step down, not from weakness, but from mastery of energy. In social settings, subtle cues shift perception. The person who speaks after a pause, not into it, feels composed. The one who stands straight but relaxed commands quiet attention. The one who listens before responding who takes a measured breath, radiates unspoken confidence. People lean in not because they're told to, but because presence pulls them. Even online, positioning shows itself in tone. Calm, clear communication holds more authority than loud opinion. The world mistakes volume for power, but those who speak softly from certainty will always be heard longer. Psychologically, humans seek equilibrium. When they encounter someone who seems steady, confident, and emotionally balanced, they unconsciously begin to mirror that. Their breathing slows, their tone shifts, their focus sharpens. This is social alignment, the invisible transfer of composure. In leadership, this principle defines great mentors. They don't dominate rooms, they elevate them. Their presence says you can rise too, and others do. To position yourself higher, begin within. Straighten not for others to see, but to remind your own body of its strength. Anchor your breath deep in your diaphragm. Feel your spine lengthen and allow your voice to settle in its natural depth. That's how you carry stillness, through alignment of body and intention. When people sense this quiet balance, they adjust instinctively. Arguments soften, conversations slow, even chaos begins to organize itself around calm energy. The world, in small ways, mirrors the posture of your spirit. But this isn't about power games or visual tricks. It's about mastery of self. To position yourself higher is to choose clarity over confusion, grace over reaction, patience over pride. It's to understand that the one who controls the tone controls the room, and that tone begins not in speech, but in presence. So lift yourself, not to be seen, but to see more clearly. Stand taller so that others may find balance in your steadiness. Speak slower so that silence feels safe in your company. Let your height, whether physical or emotional, be a place others can look up to, not a place they feel beneath. Because true elevation is not about standing above others, it's about standing above your own chaos. And in doing so, becoming a quiet reminder to everyone else that peace is possible, even here, even now. Positioning yourself higher. Every interaction carries a current, unseen but deeply felt. In every room, every meeting, every relationship, there's a quiet question being asked beneath the words. Who leads the energy here? You can feel it without needing to say it. Sometimes one person's tone steadies the room. Their presence feels grounded, their posture composed, their energy centered. Without forcing it, they become the anchor. Others, without realizing it, begin to align with that calm. This is not about control or arrogance. It's about positioning, a subtle awareness of how presence shapes perception. To position yourself higher does not mean towering above others. It means holding your energy steady enough that others rise to meet it. It is less about height and more about grounding, knowing who you are so fully that the space around you adjusts naturally. Body language is the visible architecture of confidence. The human mind interprets posture as emotion long before words arrive. Shoulders slightly back, chin relaxed, spine lifted. These are the signals of self-assurance. They tell the world, I am safe within myself, and safety is magnetic. People are drawn to it. Think of how leaders walk into a room. They don't rush. They don't shrink. They move as though the air itself parts gently to make room. That quiet grace has nothing to do with dominance. It's rhythm. A higher position begins in stillness, not in force. In any group, there is an unspoken hierarchy of energy. Those who appear calm, centered, and observant naturally occupy the higher ground. This doesn't mean superiority, it means steadiness. It's the same dynamic seen in nature. The mountain does not chase the wind. It simply stands, and the weather passes around it. When you physically position yourself slightly higher, standing while others sit, or speaking from a raised level, you immediately alter the psychological landscape of the moment. The mind, trained by centuries of instinct, associates height with authority. But height without humility becomes threat. Height with empathy becomes guidance. Imagine a conversation between a teacher and a student. The teacher bends slightly to the student's level, softening the power gap while maintaining gentle authority. The message isn't I am above you, but I am guiding you. That small adjustment turns hierarchy into mentorship. In professional spaces, even seating matters. The one who sits where they can see the room, who controls light and angle subtly, influences the rhythm of discussion. A chair slightly elevated or positioned at the head of the table gives a psychological sense of command. Yet true power is invisible. It's not in the chair, but in the calm that fills it. To position yourself higher emotionally is to rise above reaction. When tension fills a conversation, most people mirror it. Voices tighten, words sharpen. But the person who remains composed, who listens longer, breathes slower, ascends without moving. They lift the entire conversation just by refusing to descend into chaos. The mind is contagious. Anxiety spreads quickly, but so does peace. By staying grounded when others lose their balance, you become the still point others instinctively orbit around. That's what it means to hold a higher position. Not to control, but to stabilize. This dynamic plays out even in silence. Watch how groups naturally turn toward whoever maintains calm eye contact, open posture, and slow gestures. That's where authority quietly gathers, not in words, but in gravity. There's also a physical truth to positioning. Standing slightly taller expands the lungs, deepens breath, and lowers stress hormones. The body informs the mind. As posture lifts, so does presence. Confidence is not a thought, it's a shape. But there's an art to balancing height with warmth. A person who uses their elevated position to intimidate creates fear, not respect. Their presence silences voices instead of inspiring them. True authority invites expression. It makes others feel safe enough to rise too. When someone kneels beside a child to speak, they aren't lowering themselves. They're showing that real strength adapts. Power that bends doesn't break. To position yourself higher means knowing when to step down, not from weakness, but from mastery of energy. In social settings, subtle cues shift perception. The person who speaks after a pause, not into it, feels composed. The one who stands straight but relaxed commands quiet attention. The one who listens before responding, who takes a measured breath, radiates unspoken confidence. People lean in not because they're told to, but because presence pulls them. Even online, positioning shows itself in tone. Calm, clear communication holds more authority than loud opinion. The world mistakes volume for power, but those who speak softly from certainty will always be heard longer. Psychologically, humans seek equilibrium. When they encounter someone who seems steady, confident, and emotionally balanced, they unconsciously begin to mirror that. Their breathing slows, their tone shifts, their focus sharpens. This is social alignment, the invisible transfer of composure. In leadership, this principle defines great mentors. They don't dominate rooms, they elevate them. Their presence says you can rise too, and others do. To position yourself higher, begin within. Straighten not for others to see, but to remind your own body of its strength. Anchor your breath deep in your diaphragm. Feel your spine lengthen, and allow your voice to settle in its natural depth. That's how you carry stillness, through alignment of body and intention. When people sense this quiet balance, they adjust instinctively. Arguments soften, conversations slow, even chaos begins to organize itself around calm energy. The world, in small ways, mirrors the posture of your spirit. But this isn't about power games or visual tricks. It's about mastery of self. To position yourself higher is to choose clarity over confusion, grace over reaction, patience over pride. It's to understand that the one who controls the tone controls the room, and that tone begins not in speech, but in presence. So lift yourself, not to be seen, but to see more clearly. Stand taller so that others may find balance in your steadiness. Speak slower so that silence feels safe in your company. Let your height, whether physical or emotional, be a place others can look up to, not a place they feel beneath. Because true elevation is not about standing above others, it's about standing above your own chaos. And in doing so, becoming a quiet reminder to everyone else that peace is possible, even here, even now. Using a lower voice tone, there's a kind of power that doesn't need to shout. It doesn't rush, doesn't demand attention, doesn't fight to be heard. It simply speaks, softly, slowly, and the world leans closer. The voice is not just sound. It's energy, vibration, emotion woven into breath. Every tone carries meaning that words alone cannot deliver. And among those tones, none is more commanding, more calming, or more intimate than a lower voice. A deep voice doesn't mean loud. It means grounded, steady, measured, anchored in the body rather than floating above it. When you lower your voice, you invite stillness into the room. You pull people in instead of pushing them away. The listener must quiet themselves to match your rhythm, and in that quietness, connection deepens. Think about the last time someone spoke to you in a calm, low tone. It probably slowed your heartbeat without you noticing. Your mind stopped racing for a second, just to listen. Because a lower tone signals something primal, safety. It tells the body, there's no threat here. You can breathe. In ancient times, a calm, deep voice meant control. The tribe looked to those who could speak clearly amid chaos. Even now, the human nervous system responds instinctively to resonance. High, sharp sounds signal alarm, danger, urgency, panic. Lower, slower sounds signal certainty, confidence, wisdom, peace. When you speak from the chest instead of the throat, your voice carries weight. The vibrations fill space instead of piercing it. That's why people pause when someone with a grounded voice begins to talk. Not because of intimidation, but because something in the tone feels trustworthy. In communication, tone often matters more than language. A gentle phrase spoken harshly can wound. A firm truth spoken softly can heal. A low voice bridges that space between authority and warmth. The perfect balance of strength and empathy. Imagine two versions of the same sentence. Calm down. It's okay. Take a breath. Both mean to soothe, but the second, spoken low, steady, actually does. The first triggers defense. The second invites release. Lowering your tone isn't about imitation or manipulation. It's about awareness. It's learning to breathe through your words instead of around them. When your breath deepens, your voice naturally follows. The tone becomes rich, slow, magnetic. Public speakers, leaders, and storytellers all know this instinctively. A deep voice resonates not because of biology, but because it carries emotional gravity. It tells the audience, this matters. And when the voice slows, the mind follows. But the secret lies in authenticity. You can't fake calm. The body gives it away. If your tone lowers but your energy remains tense, people will sense the dissonance. The key is inner stillness. When you truly feel calm, your voice becomes calm. The tone reflects the truth beneath the words. In relationships, a lower voice can diffuse storms. When tempers rise, most people instinctively raise their volume, as if shouting will make them understood. But volume only hardens walls. The person who lowers their voice instead, who speaks softer, slower, deeper, shifts the emotional current entirely. The nervous systems in the room recalibrate. What was conflict becomes conversation. This technique isn't limited to speech. Even written words carry tone. Short sentences, gentle phrasing, patient pacing. They echo the same energy as a calm voice. In a message, tone is seen rather than heard, but it still speaks to the same part of the human mind that seeks harmony. The beauty of a low tone is its versatility. It can express authority, empathy, or intimacy, depending on the intention behind it. Whispered gently, it feels personal, like a secret shared in trust. Spoken clearly, it becomes leadership, steady, unwavering. In teaching, a lower tone keeps attention without force. It's a reminder that presence, not volume, holds power. In therapy, it builds safety. In storytelling, it creates immersion, a voice that feels like home, pulling listeners into the rhythm of thought. Even animals respond to tone more than words. A calm voice can settle a frightened dog faster than commands ever could. Because beneath language, we are all creatures of vibration, sensitive to frequency, to resonance, to the way energy travels through air. Lowering your tone also shifts the way you feel. The act itself slows breathing, lowers blood pressure, and reduces stress. It's not just communication, it's regulation. The body follows the sound it creates. When you speak slowly, you think slowly. When your voice steadies, your emotions align. You don't just sound calm, you become calm. Think of how bedtime stories are read. The voice falls, elongates, softens. It guides the listener gently toward rest. The same principle applies in life. When your tone carries peace, those around you unconsciously synchronize to it. This is emotional entrainment, the invisible way energy aligns through sound. The practice of speaking with a lower tone begins not with sound, but with silence. Sit quietly and breathe deep into your belly. Feel the vibration settle low in your chest. When you speak from that space, your words will no longer chase meaning. They'll carry it. There's a reason wisdom is often described as a quiet voice. Loudness rarely equals truth. The wisest people rarely raise their tone because they don't need to. Their presence, carried through their voice, is enough. In moments of chaos, remember, whoever controls tone controls tempo. When others shout, slow down. When others speed up, breathe deeper. The room will follow your rhythm. Lowering your voice isn't about power. It's about peace. It's choosing resonance over resistance, calm over noise. It's an act of emotional generosity, a way of telling others, you don't have to fight to be heard here. So let your words come slower, deeper, kinder. Let your voice carry the sound of still water instead of rushing waves. Because when you speak from that grounded place, people don't just hear you, they feel you. And in a world full of noise, that feeling is rare enough to be unforgettable. Keeping completely still, there is a quiet kind of strength that doesn't move. It doesn't react. It doesn't rush. It simply remains. Stillness is one of the most powerful forms of communication and one of the most misunderstood. In a world obsessed with noise, movement, and instant reaction, stillness feels unnatural. We fidget when we're nervous, fill silence when we're unsure, and move just to remind ourselves that we're doing something. But true composure, the kind that commands a room without a word, is born from stillness. To stay completely still is not to be frozen. It's to be present. It's to let movement happen around you, not within you. When your body stops chasing the world, your mind catches up with your soul. Think of a moment when someone, without speaking or moving, captured everyone's attention. Maybe it was a teacher pausing before the most important sentence, or a leader who stood quietly while others argued. The air changes. The noise begins to fade. All eyes turn toward the one who isn't trying to be seen. That is the paradox of stillness. The less you try to control the moment, the more control you actually have. Humans are wired to read motion. The brain constantly scans for change, a flicker, a gesture, a shift in energy. When movement stops, attention locks in. That's why a still person in a moving crowd draws the eye instantly. The mind whispers, something here matters. In conversation, keeping still during tension has an almost supernatural effect. When emotions rise and words collide, most people flinch, lean back, or move their hands defensively. The one who remains unmoved, posture calm, eyes steady, breathing even, becomes the anchor. The other person's nervous system begins to mirror that calm, often without realizing it. Stillness disarms chaos. It slows the pace of conflict and invites clarity. When you stay still, you give the other person's storm nowhere to land. The energy of anger, unmet by movement, eventually dissolves. This is why some of the most effective communicators pause before responding. Silence paired with stillness speaks louder than speech. It tells the listener, I'm not rushing to defend or attack. I'm choosing awareness instead. That single pause can turn confrontation into reflection. Body stillness also amplifies intention. When every part of you stops except your eyes or your voice, what moves next gains tremendous weight. A nod feels more meaningful. A single word becomes monumental. Stillness turns small gestures into statements. In acting, this is known as the power of pause. The best performers understand that stillness on stage is not emptiness. It's tension held with grace. It creates space for emotion to breathe, for the audience to feel before being told. The same principle applies to life. A moment of complete stillness allows understanding to catch up with the moment. Practicing this kind of composure begins with awareness of the body. Notice how often you shift, tap, or cross your arms out of habit. Notice how movement often follows discomfort. Each twitch, each adjustment, is the body's way of escaping uncertainty. To keep still is to accept that discomfort, to stay with it, to listen to it. It's not suppression, it's strength. In difficult conversations, stillness communicates safety. When others see you calm and motionless, they sense steadiness. Their subconscious registers that you are not a threat. Their breathing slows to match yours. This is how peace spreads. Silently, through posture, stillness also deepens perception. When the body quiets, the senses heighten. You begin to notice details. The rhythm of another's speech, the tiny shifts in expression, the hidden meanings behind words. The noise of your own reactions fades, making room for true listening. There is power in the still listener. People open up to those who don't rush to fill the air. Stillness says, I can hold this moment with you. And that is one of the rarest gifts you can give another human being. The space to be fully heard. Yet, the discipline of stillness takes practice. It goes against the nervous system's instinct to move when emotions surge. But every time you resist the urge to fidget or react, you strengthen your ability to remain centered in chaos. In leadership, keeping still while others panic creates immediate stability. People instinctively trust those who do not mirror fear. They look to you for guidance not because you have all the answers, but because your stillness feels like safety. In negotiation, silence paired with stillness becomes strategy. After a proposal or statement, staying motionless lets your words linger. The other side, unable to read your reaction, fills the silence with their own. Often, they reveal more than they intended. Stillness gives your ideas time to breathe, and your presence time to grow. Even in everyday life, moments of stillness can transform the ordinary. Sitting quietly before responding to a text, pausing at a doorway before entering a meeting, taking one deep breath before answering a difficult question. Each pause resets the rhythm of the world around you. Nature teaches this truth beautifully. The lake reflects perfectly only when the water is still. The moment wind disturbs it, the image blurs. Our minds work the same way. When emotions stir too much, clarity fades. But when we hold stillness, even for a few seconds, reflection returns. Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing one thing completely, being present, breathing without fleeing, thinking without spiraling, listening without planning what to say next. It's an act of full engagement disguised as silence. And stillness isn't just physical. There is emotional stillness, the art of not reacting to every feeling. Mental stillness, the ability to pause thought before it becomes anxiety. Spiritual stillness, the quiet faith that things unfold as they should. When all three align, your presence becomes unshakable. In the end, keeping completely still is not about power over others. It's about peace within yourself. It's choosing not to match the world's chaos, but to invite it into calm. It's learning that movement doesn't always mean progress, and silence doesn't always mean absence. So the next time life pulls at your edges, when voices rise, when emotions swell, do nothing. Stay still. Feel the ground beneath your feet, the weight of your breath, the heartbeat of your own calm. The world will keep moving, but you will remain steady, centered, whole. Because sometimes the loudest presence in any room is the one that doesn't move at all. Making deliberate, slow movements. After stillness comes motion, but not the kind born of restlessness. True power begins when movement emerges from intention, not impulse. Every gesture, every turn, every shift of the eyes becomes deliberate, almost sacred. It's as though the body itself begins to speak a language of precision, one where less means more and where speed is replaced by meaning. To move slowly is to command time. It tells the world that you are not being pulled by chaos, but moving through it by choice. Quick movement signals urgency. Slow movement suggests mastery. The one who moves with care appears to know something others do not, that life is not a race, but a rhythm. Watch the way a calm person walks into a room. Their steps are measured, their gestures unhurried. They are not competing with noise or attention, and yet everyone notices them. Because in a sea of frantic motion, stillness and slowness stand out. They radiate control. Psychologically, slow movement affects both the observer and the self. When you slow down, your breathing follows. When your breathing steadies, your voice deepens. When your voice deepens, your presence grows. The nervous system reads slowness as safety, and those around you begin to sync to your tempo. This principle is quietly used by negotiators, speakers, and leaders. The great ones never rush their gestures. They lift a hand to emphasize a point and hold it there just long enough for the moment to settle. They turn their heads slowly, scanning the room as though every person matters. They pause between movements so that each one feels intentional. Even the smallest actions, reaching for a glass, leaning forward, become part of the message. Speed is the language of anxiety. Slowness is the language of confidence. The world trusts what moves patiently. Think of a surgeon in the operating room. Every motion is exact, every movement carefully timed. Rushing would mean disaster. Or imagine a conductor leading an orchestra. Their hands glide through air, shaping sound with slow precision. These gestures are not just physical, they're psychological. They create presence. In social interaction, deliberate movement can transform perception. The way you sit, stand, or shift your weight speaks volumes before you utter a single word. When you adjust too often, you seem uncertain. When you stay composed and move with purpose, people sense stability. They may not know why, but they feel it, and they trust it. Even in high-stress moments, slowing your gestures changes everything. If someone challenges you or emotions rise, resist the instinct to move fast. Instead, take one slow breath. Lower your hand gently. Turn your head slowly. Look, but don't snap. Every slow action signals control. It says, I'm not reacting, I'm choosing. The secret lies in awareness. Every time you move, ask yourself, why now? A gesture without purpose dilutes presence. A gesture with purpose amplifies it. When you move only when meaning calls for it, even silence becomes expressive. Actors and dancers understand this intimately. They train not to move constantly, but to move meaningfully. Each gesture must carry intention. Each pause must breathe emotion. In performance, timing isn't just about rhythm, it's about respect for the moment. The same truth applies to life. Rushing through experiences dulls them. Moving deliberately lets them unfold. Deliberate movement also shapes emotion. Try this. When anger flares, slow your body. Let your hand rest instead of rising. Let your shoulders drop instead of tightening. The emotion loses its grip. The body teaches the mind that calm is still possible. This is how monks, martial artists, and therapists all control energy, not by suppression, but by tempo. In communication, slow movement draws attention to your words. When your hand lifts to emphasize a thought, when your head tilts slightly before you respond, people follow your rhythm. The slowness pulls them in. It gives their minds space to catch up with meaning. We are creatures of mirroring. When one person slows down, others unconsciously follow. A group's energy can shift entirely through one person's deliberate stillness. It's emotional leadership, guiding the collective pace through your own restraint. Deliberate movement also enhances observation. When you slow your gestures, you begin to notice how others move. You see patterns, restlessness, confidence, hesitation, that were invisible before. You begin to understand people not by what they say, but by how their energy flows through their bodies. There's also grace in slow motion. It reminds us that life doesn't demand urgency. We do. When you lift your coffee cup slowly, when you close a door softly, when you walk with awareness, you reclaim the present. You tell time, I'm not rushing after you anymore. Even in digital life where everything races, messages, videos, updates, slowness stands out like a calm voice in a crowd. The one who answers slowly, who chooses words carefully, commands more attention than the one who replies instantly. Deliberation is the new rarity, but deliberate movement isn't about being mechanical or rigid. It's about merging awareness with flow. Think of water moving down a stream. It's never hurried, yet it never stops. That's the essence of true calm motion, gentle, constant, intentional. In relationships, moving slowly shows care. When you hand something to someone without rush, when you reach to comfort without abruptness, it signals presence. The gesture itself says, I'm here fully, not halfway, not distracted. People remember that kind of presence more than any word. To master deliberate movement, begin by practicing small things. Move your hand toward an object with awareness. Breathe before you turn. Pause before you gesture. Over time, your entire way of being becomes rhythmic, not stiff, but fluid, intentional, grounded. This way of movement has an emotional echo. It changes how others feel around you. They sense steadiness. They breathe easier. They listen longer. Because deliberate movement, at its heart, is a form of respect for yourself, for the moment, and for whoever shares it with you. In truth, making deliberate, slow movements isn't just about control. It's about harmony. It's a way of aligning your body with your purpose, of ensuring that every action matches the energy you want to create. So move slowly, move intentionally. Let your gestures carry silence instead of noise. Let each action become an offering of calm, of awareness, of presence. Because when you slow down enough to notice your own movement, the world slows down with you. And in that slowing, everything, even the smallest motion, begins to matter again. Pausing before responding. The most powerful part of any conversation is not the words we speak. It's the space between them, that small invisible gap after someone finishes talking before we choose to reply. That's where wisdom lives. To pause before responding is to step out of the storm of reaction. It's the difference between hearing and listening, between reacting and understanding. It's where emotion turns into awareness, and awareness becomes clarity. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it. with words, explanations, defenses, noise. But silence is not emptiness, it's depth. It's the space where truth gathers before it's ready to be spoken. When you learn to pause, you stop answering the surface and start responding to what's real. Imagine someone speaking to you in anger. Their words are sharp, fueled by frustration. The natural instinct is to strike back, to correct, defend, explain. But if you pause, just for a moment, something extraordinary happens. The other person's words stop echoing, and the air clears. You see not just what they said, but what they meant. Beneath the frustration, there's usually pain, confusion, or fear. The pause gives you time to hear that. The human brain processes emotion faster than logic. That's why we often say things we don't mean, because the feeling speaks before the reason arrives. A pause lets reason catch up. It gives your mind the few seconds it needs to align with your heart. In that alignment, you find truth. In conversation, the pause is also a gesture of respect. It tells the other person, I'm actually thinking about what you just said. It shows that their words have landed, that you are not preparing your reply while they're still speaking. It's an act of humility, of saying, I don't need to win this moment. I need to understand it. Psychologically, pauses carry authority. They project composure. When you answer too quickly, it signals anxiety or defensiveness. When you wait, calmly, naturally, you appear confident. You show that you're not controlled by urgency. You control time. Skilled negotiators use silence as their most effective tool. After a question or an offer, they pause. They wait. That waiting creates gentle pressure. The other side, uncomfortable with the silence, often fills it, revealing more than they planned. But the pause isn't manipulation. It's mastery. It's using stillness as a lens to see what hurried words might hide. In teaching, pauses give lessons space to breathe. A teacher who speaks non-stop overwhelms. A teacher who pauses allows ideas to settle. In storytelling, the pause builds suspense. It makes words echo. It makes the listener lean in, anticipating what comes next. In life, pausing before responding prevents countless regrets. How many times have we said something too quickly? Words thrown like sparks that later burned us. A pause is water to that fire. It's the space where emotion cools and truth refines itself. But the pause is not only for others. It's for you. When you stop before replying, you reconnect with your center. You return to yourself. You remind your body that it doesn't need to rush to be safe. You give your nervous system permission to breathe. Even 2 seconds can change everything. A single breath can decide whether a conversation becomes an argument or an understanding. Think of how nature pauses. The ocean doesn't rush its waves. It waits between each rise and fall. The wind slows before it shifts direction. The world itself breathes in rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale. That same rhythm lives in you. Speaking without pausing is like exhaling without ever breathing in. Eventually, you run out of air. When you pause, others lean into your silence. They listen differently. They feel the depth in your words. Because silence, when used with intention, isn't absence, it's presence. It holds space for meaning. But the art of pausing is delicate. Too short and it's unnoticed. Too long and it turns awkward. The perfect pause feels organic, as if time itself has slowed just enough for understanding to arrive. Practice it in small moments. When someone asks you a question, breathe first. Feel your body settle before your words leave it. When someone confides in you, let silence answer before language does. When emotion rises, count the heartbeat between reaction and reply. That heartbeat is the door to awareness. The pause also deepens emotional intelligence. It lets you hear not just what was said, but what was not said. The hidden emotion under the surface, the sigh before the sentence, the tremor behind the laugh, the weight in the word fine. The pause makes you a listener of souls, not just sounds. Leaders who pause before speaking earn trust. Their stillness says, I think before I speak. I don't waste words. The pause transforms communication into something deliberate, something human. Even in digital conversation, where pauses are rare, waiting before responding changes everything. You write differently. You respond with intention instead of impulse. You begin to notice how silence, even typed, can feel powerful. In relationships, the pause creates peace. It stops escalation before it begins. It gives both sides a moment to remember love before pride takes over. It turns conflict into connection by reminding you that understanding cannot exist at the speed of reaction. And sometimes, the pause doesn't lead to words at all. Sometimes silence is the answer. A look, a breath, a shared moment. that says more than language ever could. The most eloquent speakers, the most trusted leaders, the most compassionate friends, all share this one trait. They know when not to speak. They understand that timing, not volume, is what gives words their power. So pause. Not to hesitate, but to honor. Pause because what you say next matters. Pause because the person before you deserves your full presence. Pause because silence is not the absence of connection. It's the moment connection finally becomes real. And when you finally do speak, your words will carry the stillness of that pause within them. Calm, deliberate, unforgettable. Because in the end, it's not the length of what we say that lingers. It's the quiet before it, the space that lets truth breathe. Standing quietly and staring. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill the air, it changes it. A presence that doesn't announce itself through noise or movement, but through attention. You can feel it before you see it. The weight of someone's gaze, steady, unmoving. It's not aggression. It's not curiosity. It's something deeper, older. It's the silent gravity of focus. To stand quietly and stare is to break the rhythm of the world. Most people move quickly, speak constantly, glance restlessly from one thing to another. Their attention flickers like candlelight in wind. But when someone simply stands, still, unhurried, and looks with full awareness, time shifts, the room notices, the air tightens. Because silence with intention feels louder than speech. Humans are built to detect attention. It's an ancient instinct. Long before words, before reason, survival depended on sensing when eyes were upon us. To be watched was to be hunted or loved. That sensitivity never left us. Even now, the faintest awareness of a gaze prickles the skin, raises the pulse, sharpens focus. It's the body remembering what the mind has forgotten. That being seen changes everything. But there's more to this than instinct. Standing quietly and maintaining a steady gaze speaks to the psychology of power, presence, and understanding. The one who can remain still while others move, who can observe without interrupting. That person shapes the space around them. They don't chase attention, they become it. Think of a teacher pausing in front of a noisy class. They don't shout, they simply stand there, quiet and unmoving. Within seconds, voices fade, heads turn. The silence grows heavy until even the smallest sound feels loud. That's not fear, it's gravity. People are drawn to presence that doesn't compete. The same principle applies in life. In conversation, when someone stands or sits quietly, eyes fixed with calm attention, they communicate far more than words could. They say, I see you, I'm here, I'm not leaving this moment until it tells me the truth. It's not confrontation, it's curiosity sharpened by patience. There's a reason detectives, therapists, and negotiators use this technique. Silence and steady observation invite revelation. The longer the gaze lasts, the more pressure builds, not from aggression, but from presence. The human mind craves movement and sound. When denied both, it begins to reveal itself. Words stumble out just to fill the stillness. The truth slips through the cracks of discomfort. But this kind of staring, the quiet kind, only works when paired with empathy. Without warmth, it becomes intimidation. Without compassion, it becomes dominance. The purpose isn't to overpower, but to understand, to watch closely enough to see what's not being said. A therapist might sit silently while a client avoids their eyes. Minutes pass, then slowly the client looks up. In that gaze, tears begin to rise. Because being seen without interruption, without judgment, is something the soul isn't used to. Sometimes, being stared at softly is the first time someone feels truly acknowledged. Stillness and staring create a mirror. The person before you begins to see themselves in your calmness. Their emotions, reflected back through your silence, become clearer. This is the quiet art of awareness, using attention not to invade, but to reveal. In social life, maintaining eye contact while standing still can shift entire dynamics. People who can stay grounded while others fidget radiate confidence. They don't need to prove their place in the room. Their silence confirms it. Their gaze says, I'm not in a hurry to be understood. I already am. Yet, this must be handled delicately. Hold the gaze too long, and it feels like a challenge. Too short, and it feels uncertain. The perfect stare is balanced. Unwavering, yet soft. Engaged, yet unforced. It's not a contest. It's communion. In nature, predators and prey communicate through gaze. A predator's stare freezes movement, a psychological hold that even humans respond to. But among humans, the same principle transforms when paired with consciousness. A calm, compassionate stare can soothe instead of scare. It tells the nervous system, you are safe under this attention. Leaders often use this energy unconsciously. When they speak, they pause and look, not at everyone, but at one person at a time, long enough for the listener to feel it. That moment feels intimate. The listener feels chosen. The leader doesn't move quickly to the next gaze. They let the silence stretch, anchoring presence. There's something magnetic about a person who stands quietly and simply looks. The world, addicted to motion, doesn't know what to do with stillness. That's why it notices it so much. But this technique is not about manipulation. It's about deep observation, seeing with full attention. In a conversation, you can learn more by watching how someone shifts their weight, how their eyes dart, how their breath changes, than by hearing every word they speak. The body always tells the truth. Stillness gives you time to see it. At the same time, being looked at deeply can feel vulnerable, even uncomfortable, because it strips away disguise. The eyes that don't move say, I'm not distracted by your mask. And that's where real connection begins, in that fragile, wordless space where people stop pretending. Stillness paired with focus becomes sacred when used with kindness. A parent kneeling to meet their child's eyes, a friend watching another cry without interrupting, a partner simply holding a gaze across a table, saying, I'm here without sound. These are the moments when time disappears. There's also self-awareness in this practice. When you stand quietly and look at another, at the horizon, at your own reflection, you begin to notice your own discomfort, your own impulse to look away, to fidget, to flee from stillness. That awareness is growth, because when you learn to hold your own gaze, you learn to hold your truth. Silence and staring, at their deepest, are meditations. They draw you inward. You stop trying to interpret and simply experience. You begin to feel energy, the small vibrations between yourself and the world around you. To stand quietly and stare is to say, I trust the moment enough not to rush it. It's to believe that understanding unfolds not through constant motion, but through presence. So the next time you find yourself in a crowded space or in the middle of tension, try this. Stop. Don't speak. Don't shift. Just look, softly but completely. Let your eyes do what your words cannot. Let your silence speak first. Because in a world that moves too fast to see itself, the one who stands quietly and stares doesn't just observe. They awaken something. A reminder that attention is the rarest form of love. And sometimes, simply being fully present, motionless, wordless, aware, is enough to change the entire room. Ending sentences incomplete. There's a strange power in what's left unsaid. Sometimes, the silence that follows a half-finished sentence speaks louder than the words themselves. It lingers, a soft hum in the air, pulling the listener's mind to fill in the missing pieces. Because when language stops, imagination begins. To end a sentence incomplete is to leave the door open, for curiosity, for tension, for reflection. It's not a mistake, it's an invitation. You're asking the listener to meet you halfway, to participate in meaning rather than just receive it. Human minds crave closure. We want endings, answers, conclusions. When something breaks that pattern, when a thought trails off into quiet, the mind can't let it go. It leans forward, waiting, searching, and in that waiting, attention deepens. Think about when someone starts to speak as if they're about to say something profound, and then stops. You wait, the silence stretches, your heart beats faster. That unfinished thought becomes magnetic. You're not listening to them anymore, you're listening through them, into the silence they left behind. Writers, poets, and storytellers have known this secret for centuries. The unfinished line leaves an echo that finished sentences never can. It lets the listener's soul wander into the spaces between words. Because truth, the deepest kind, rarely fits neatly into a full stop. In conversation, ending a sentence incomplete creates subtle psychological gravity. It draws the other person in. They may lean forward, waiting for the rest, or even speak it for you. And in doing so, they reveal themselves. They show you what they expect, what they fear, what they hope you were about to say. This is why therapists sometimes pause mid-thought. It sounds like you're afraid that if you open up, maybe, the silence that follows is not absence. It's space. It invites the other person to finish the sentence with their own truth. In emotional communication, incomplete sentences express vulnerability. They say, I'm thinking, I'm feeling. I haven't found the right word yet. That openness, that unpolished honesty builds trust. It shows that you're not performing. You're being real. But there's another layer, the mysterious one. Ending a sentence incomplete can make a statement feel infinite, unresolved, haunting. It leaves the listener wondering not just what was meant, but why it wasn't said. That space becomes a mirror for their own emotions. Consider this. I thought I could trust you, but the sentence stops. You don't need to finish it. The silence carries the rest. The listener hears every version of what you might have said. The disappointment, the sadness, the restraint. Words would only narrow the feeling. Silence expands it. This technique, when used with calmness, can hold enormous emotional weight, because it's not just what you say, it's what you allow others to feel in the absence of your voice. Philosophers once wrote that the truest ideas can't be spoken at all. The moment they are described, they lose their purity. Incomplete sentences honor that truth. They point toward meaning without trapping it. They remind us that some emotions are too large for language. In storytelling, an unfinished sentence creates suspense. In relationships, it creates depth. In leadership, it creates reflection. Because people remember not just what you told them, they remember what you almost told them. This form of communication relies on timing. The pause after an incomplete sentence is crucial. Too short, and it sounds like you lost your thought. Too long, and it feels manipulative. The perfect break is organic, the kind that feels like breath caught between awareness and emotion. Imagine a moment when two people are talking after a long silence. One says softly, "I never thought I'd see you again after," and stops. The listener's heart races. Their mind floods with possibilities. That unfinished moment holds more emotion than any explanation could. Because what we don't say, what we can't say, is often what we feel most deeply. Incomplete sentences also have the power to protect. Sometimes silence is mercy. You stop mid-sentence because the rest would hurt, or it would reveal too much. It's restraint disguised as hesitation. It's emotional wisdom, knowing that not every truth needs to be spoken to be understood. And then there's the spiritual layer. When you end thoughts before they're complete, you leave space for life itself to fill the rest. You surrender control, trusting that not everything must be finished by your own hands. It's the same principle as art. The most beautiful paintings often leave parts of the canvas untouched. In a world obsessed with finishing, with constant answers and immediate replies, incompleteness feels rebellious. But there's peace in it. There's honesty in admitting that you don't always have the perfect conclusion, because no conversation, no emotion, no human being is ever truly complete. Ending a sentence halfway can also signal understanding without words. When you say, "I just wish you could see what I," and stop, the listener already knows. The silence becomes empathy. They meet you there, in the gap. Even in conflict, this technique transforms energy. When someone accuses you or demands a reaction, and you begin to speak, "I understand why you feel that way. I just don't know if..." The pause lowers tension. It interrupts the rhythm of defense. It makes space for mutual reflection. Incomplete sentences work because they mirror real thought. The human mind doesn't think in neat, punctuated lines. It drifts, pauses, circles back. When you let your speech reflect that natural rhythm, you sound more human, more alive. But the key is intention. Ending a sentence incomplete should never feel manipulative. It should feel sincere, like a sigh, not a strategy. It's not silence used to control, but silence used to connect. In teaching or public speaking, leaving a sentence unfinished can make the message linger. Imagine ending a speech not with a conclusion, but with a trail of thought that leads the listener inward. And maybe, just maybe, the answer isn't out there at all. That ellipsis becomes the echo that stays with them long after the words fade. So learn to love the pause at the edge of expression. Don't rush to fill it. Let it breathe. Because sometimes the spaces between your words carry more truth than your words themselves. Every silence has a shape. Every unfinished thought holds a heartbeat. Every incomplete sentence is a bridge between what's known and what's felt, between you and whoever's listening. And in that gentle space of almost speaking, something timeless happens. Connection becomes infinite. Sudden silence in discussion. There is a moment in every conversation when the air shifts. A pulse that breaks through the rhythm of words. The sound fades, mid-sentence perhaps, and suddenly everything stands still. It's not planned, It's not even conscious. It's silence. But not just silence, sudden silence. The kind that doesn't arrive gently, but drops like a wave of invisible gravity. It feels heavy at first. The world keeps breathing, but the voices stop. You can almost hear the hum of the room, the faint echo of your own thoughts bouncing off the walls. It's in these moments, when words collapse and only awareness remains, that truth begins to reveal itself. Most people are afraid of silence, especially the sudden kind. It feels awkward, tense, unfamiliar. The human instinct is to fill it quickly, to laugh, to explain, to say something that makes it go away. But those who can stay still inside that sudden quiet hold a different kind of power, the power of presence. Because silence is not absence. It's a shift in attention. It's when the surface noise falls away and the deeper current becomes visible. The pause between words is where meaning hides, waiting to be noticed. Imagine a heated argument, voices rising, emotions swirling, sentences cutting over each other. Then, without warning, one person stops speaking. Complete silence. The sound collapses. The other person's voice lingers in the air, unsure whether to continue. That sudden stop, that quiet, changes everything. It's as if the energy of the room has been reset. The brain needs to adjust, to catch up. The silence becomes the loudest thing in the world. Psychologically, sudden silence is disarming. It disrupts expectation. The human brain anticipates rhythm, back and forth, word after word. When that pattern breaks, confusion enters, followed by focus. The listener's attention sharpens. They lean in, searching for what the silence means. That is the moment of control. Not dominance, but direction. Silence redirects emotion. It cools anger, slows thought, and gives reflection room to breathe. It's a natural reset button in the chaos of communication. Great communicators use this instinctively. When a speaker suddenly pauses mid-flow, the audience freezes. The mind leans forward, waiting. Every second of silence deepens anticipation. The next word will feel heavier, because silence gave it weight. In conversation, sudden silence can carry many meanings. It can signal reflection, surprise, restraint, or quiet authority. It can say, "I'm thinking," without saying a word. It can say, "That's enough," without needing confrontation. Even in friendship or love, silence can appear unexpectedly. Not from distance, but from depth. When you're speaking from the heart, sometimes emotion outruns language. The words stop, but the feeling continues. You glance at the other person, and for a moment, everything is said in the quiet. Silence, especially when sudden, reveals truth faster than words ever could. Because when sound stops, you notice what remains. The tone of breathing, the twitch of the eyes, the tremor in the hands. Emotion becomes visible when noise disappears. Leaders, therapists, and negotiators all understand this. A sudden silence after a difficult question makes the other person think deeper. They begin to fill the space with honesty they didn't plan to share. Because silence, when held gently, becomes a mirror. People see themselves reflected in it. But to use silence effectively, your energy must stay calm. If your silence feels sharp or defensive, it builds tension. If it feels open and grounded, it creates trust. The difference is in intention. Silence can be a wall or a bridge, depending on what lies behind it. The sudden silence also affects the self. When you stop speaking in the middle of a storm, when you catch yourself reacting and choose quiet instead, your own nervous system recalibrates. Breathing slows, thought becomes clear. You begin to listen not just to others, but to the quiet voice within you that the noise had drowned out. In art and music, silence plays the same role. A song without pauses feels chaotic. A story without quiet moments feels breathless. Silence is the frame that makes sound beautiful. It's the space between notes that creates melody. It's the gap between words that gives language its soul. In emotional communication, sudden silence can reveal what someone truly feels. When you ask a question and they go quiet, it's rarely because they didn't hear you. It's because they're feeling something deeper than words can handle. That pause, that break, is sacred. It's the sound of truth forming. Sometimes silence is the only honest response. When words would only simplify something vast, grief, awe, love, quiet becomes the truest language. You don't say anything. You become the moment. Still, silence must be handled with care. Too much and it turns cold. Too sudden and it feels like punishment. The art lies in balance. Silence that listens, not silences that isolate. Silence that invites reflection, not fear. In relationships, when used with softness, a sudden quiet moment can heal. During conflict, stopping mid-sentence can break the cycle of reaction. Instead of adding more noise, you add stillness. It gives both hearts space to remember what matters beyond the argument. Even in solitude, sudden silence is a teacher. When the world's noise fades, the notifications, the conversations, the endless stream of thought, you start to hear something else. The heartbeat, the breath, the quiet hum of being alive. Silence reminds you that existence itself is enough. There's a story told among monks that enlightenment doesn't come with sound or vision, but with silence so deep you can hear your soul breathing. That is the gift hidden in sudden stillness. It strips life down to the essence of awareness. The more comfortable you become with sudden silence, the more peaceful you become with uncertainty. Because silence is simply the unknown in sound form, the empty space that asks, can you stay here without rushing to fill it? In modern life, people run from quiet because it feels like a mirror, one that reflects emotions, fears, and truths we've buried beneath words. But if you can stay in that mirror long enough, the reflection softens. Silence becomes not something to escape, but something to trust. So the next time a conversation falls suddenly quiet, don't rush to rescue it. Let it breathe. Let it unfold. There's something sacred happening there. A realignment of energy, an awakening of presence. Because silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the part of it that doesn't need translation. When you allow sudden silence to exist, you teach others, and yourself, that peace is not found in speaking, but in being. Walking away mid-conversation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. And the most powerful way to say it is to leave. Walking away mid-conversation is not about rudeness, nor about victory. It's about energy. Knowing when a dialogue has lost its truth, when words are no longer serving understanding, but fueling confusion. It's the moment you choose peace over noise, clarity over chaos. Every conversation begins as an exchange, a rhythm between two minds. But some reach a point where the rhythm turns into a collision, where words no longer land, they only echo. Logic fades, tone sharpens, emotions loop in circles. You can feel it. That invisible shift when continuing will only make things heavier. And that's when walking away becomes not withdrawal, but wisdom. Most people are trapped by the idea that staying means strength, that endurance equals maturity. But sometimes, staying in a conversation that no longer breathes is the truest form of fear. Fear of silence, fear of endings, fear of being misunderstood. The one who knows when to step away, calmly and without bitterness, carries a quiet kind of mastery. When you walk away mid-conversation with calmness, not anger, not dramatics, you reclaim your rhythm. You remind both yourself and the other person that you will not dance to discord. You choose to walk toward equilibrium. It's important to understand the how. Walking away mid-conversation is not slamming a door. It's closing one softly. It's not turning your back in fury. It's turning your focus inward toward reflection. Your body language must whisper peace, not punishment. The silence you leave behind should feel like air returning to a room that had forgotten how to breathe. Psychologically, this act carries immense impact. When someone walks away suddenly, but without aggression, the human brain freezes in confusion. It breaks the conversational pattern, forcing reflection. The listener replays the last words, wondering what shifted. That moment of absence becomes the most memorable part of the interaction. It's the same principle that silence uses. Absence amplifies meaning, but when combined with movement, the physical departure, it creates something deeper. You're showing, not telling, that presence must be earned, not demanded. In emotional terms, walking away protects your peace. It prevents escalation, saves dignity, and maintains control of your energy. It teaches others that conversation is not ownership, that just because someone speaks, you are not obliged to stay and absorb. You have the right to step away when your soul begins to shrink. In relationships, it can be both boundary and balm. There are moments when continued dialogue only digs wounds deeper. Words stop healing and start hurting. Walking away then isn't giving up. It's pausing to protect love from turning into resentment. It's saying, I care enough about this connection to not destroy it with words we'll both regret. True composure lies in how you leave. Not in haste, not with heavy breath or trembling hand, but in stillness. You take one deep breath, You meet the other person's eyes and you say nothing. Your silence becomes your final sentence. And then you turn away, not to escape, but to breathe again. The world often confuses walking away with weakness, but if done from awareness, it's the opposite. It's the power to choose your response, the strength to not engage with what no longer serves you. It's the realization that peace is not found in winning arguments, but in refusing to be pulled into ones that don't grow you. There's also grace in walking away. It shows emotional maturity, the ability to value calm more than being right. You're not running from conflict. You're stepping toward reflection. You're choosing to respond later, when the storm inside you has passed. Because the truth is, no one hears clearly through thunder. The art of this action is subtle. It's not about creating distance, it's about restoring space. When a conversation becomes too loud, too fast, or too tangled, stepping away allows everything to reset. It's a soft interruption that says, let's not ruin what silence could heal. Therapists often use a similar technique in tense discussions. When emotion overwhelms reason, they pause the session, allowing both sides to breathe. The pause resets the nervous system. In life, walking away is that same pause, embodied. It's physical mindfulness, but it takes inner strength to do it right. Anger wants to explode. Pride wants to argue. Ego wants the last word. But peace just leaves. Not to prove anything, but because it doesn't need to. It knows its own value. Think of monks leaving the temple during conflict. They don't rush. They glide. Their exit carries presence, not escape. They know that sometimes the most compassionate act is to remove your energy from a space that cannot yet receive it gently. In conversations of love, friendship, or family, this gesture can become transformative. When emotions run too high, saying, "I need a moment," and stepping away silently gives everyone a gift. Time. Time for emotion to cool, time for words to settle, time for understanding to return. It's not the end of communication. It's the pause that makes real communication possible again. In professional life too, the same principle holds. During negotiations, debates, or tense meetings, walking away at the right moment conveys calm authority. It says, I don't operate under pressure. I decide on my own rhythm. It shifts the power dynamic instantly, without aggression. But remember, how you walk matters more than when. Every movement should speak respect. A calm breath, relaxed shoulders, eyes soft. No slamming doors, no sharp steps, just quiet departure. Because the goal is not to make a point, it's to maintain your peace. There's beauty in that restraint. When you leave softly, your absence feels meaningful, not cold. It leaves room for realization, for both you and the other person to understand what truly matters beyond the words that were said. Sometimes, walking away is not about ending something. It's about beginning it again later, with more awareness. It's a temporary silence that preserves the possibility of harmony. And sometimes, it's final. The moment you realize that no amount of talking will change what isn't ready to listen. In those moments, walking away becomes an act of self-respect. The quiet acknowledgement that your peace no longer belongs in that space. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's soft. You turn, you walk, you breathe, and behind you the air begins to settle. The conversation fades, but its echo becomes understanding. Because walking away mid-conversation is not an escape from connection. It's a return to self. It's remembering that not every dialogue deserves your energy, and not every silence needs to be filled. In a world obsessed with having the last word, the one who walks away first, calmly, gracefully, often speaks the loudest. Asking vague questions. There's a certain kind of question that doesn't look for an answer. It doesn't demand, it doesn't corner. It opens. It lingers in the air, soft and uncertain, like a mist that lets the truth reveal itself rather than forcing it out. Most people ask questions to gain information, but vague questions serve a different purpose. They're not about clarity. They're about invitation. They draw others inward, make them think, reflect, reveal. They shift a conversation from the surface to the subconscious. A vague question isn't a lack of precision, it's an art of presence. It's knowing that sometimes the best way to understand someone is to ask less directly, to give them room to wander through their own thoughts, because the human heart doesn't respond well to interrogation. It opens only when it feels safe, unjudged, free. When you ask something unclear, softly, curiously, you're saying, I'm not here to control your answer. I just want to see where your mind goes. And that freedom creates trust. For example, instead of asking, Are you upset with me? You might say, something feels a little different lately. What do you think it is? The first question corners. The second explores, one seeks conclusion. The other seeks connection. Psychologically, vague questions bypass the mind's defenses. When you're too specific, the brain activates logic. It looks for the right answer. But when the question is open and slightly undefined, the mind relaxes. Emotion starts speaking before reason catches up. Therapists, investigators, and great communicators use this technique instinctively. A vague question like, "What was that like for you?" can uncover more truth than a direct, detailed one. Because it doesn't impose structure. It lets the other person choose what matters most to them. In relationships, vague questions create emotional space. They tell the other person, "You don't have to fit your feelings into my frame." That's a rare kind of freedom, one that turns communication into discovery. There's something poetic about how vague questions float in conversation. They don't pin the moment down, they let it breathe. They give silence permission to exist. And in that silence, people often say the things they didn't even know they wanted to say. When you ask clearly, you get an answer. When you ask vaguely, you get a story. Because stories are born in uncertainty. The mind loves to explore, to connect dots that were never explicitly drawn. That's what vague questions do. They turn a conversation into a mirror. The listener ends up revealing their inner world while thinking they're answering yours. But there's a balance to maintain. Vagueness must feel intentional, not careless. It should carry warmth, not confusion. The tone must be soft, a blend of curiosity and calm. Otherwise, it feels manipulative or dismissive. The secret lies in energy. If your energy says, "I genuinely want to understand," vagueness becomes a gift. If your energy says, "I'm avoiding truth," vagueness becomes a wall. Let's look deeper into how it works. When someone asks a precise question, "Why were you late?" it triggers defense. When someone asks vaguely, "Rough day?" it invites openness. The first demands explanation. The second offers empathy. The beauty of vague questions is that they lead people inward without realizing it. When you ask, "How do you feel about that?" you hand someone the mirror. They pause, think, maybe even go quiet, and in that silence, something stirs. They begin to hear their own truth out loud for the first time. Even spiritually, vague questions are powerful. They echo the way the universe speaks to us. Not in direct answers, but in subtle nudges, half-formed thoughts, symbols, and whispers. Questions like, "What if this moment is trying to teach me something?" Or "What does my silence want to say?" don't have fixed answers, but they guide you toward awareness. In art, vagueness invites imagination. A painter doesn't explain every shape. They leave space for the viewer's interpretation. A poet doesn't describe every detail. They hint and let the reader's soul fill in the rest. Similarly, a vague question leaves emotional negative space. The listener's mind paints the answer. The most interesting conversations happen when neither side fully knows where it's going. That's what vague questions create. Not interviews, but explorations. The words become a soft trail through the forest of thought, with no fixed destination, only curiosity guiding the way. You might ask, "What do you think about everything that's been happening?" And in that openness, people often reveal their deepest anxieties, hopes, and confessions. Because when the mind isn't told what to answer, it starts answering what it feels. This is also why vague questions are powerful in tension. In a heated moment, asking directly, "What's wrong with you?" fuels fire, but asking softly, "What's really going on here?" dissolves it. The question loses its sharp edges. It offers understanding instead of accusation. But vague questions aren't only for others. They're for you too. When you sit quietly and ask yourself, "What am I really afraid of?" Or "What do I actually want from this?" you open the door to your own honesty. The answers that arise might be unclear at first, but they'll always be true. That's the paradox. The less precise the question, the more honest the answer. Because life isn't precise. Feelings aren't formulas. The mind wants certainty, but the soul thrives on mystery. Vague questions teach patience, the kind that listens without forcing meaning too soon. They remind us that communication isn't a race to clarity, but a dance with curiosity. They also carry gentleness. When someone is hurt, lost, or afraid, direct questions can feel like bright light in dark eyes. But vague ones, soft, slow, feel like dawn. They ease the truth out instead of tearing it open. Even in leadership, vague questions have power. Instead of ordering or instructing, you invite reflection. What do you think would make this work better? That kind of question turns followers into thinkers. It awakens responsibility instead of obedience. And sometimes, vague questions are simply beautiful. Where does it hurt? What do you wish I knew? What do you need that you haven't said? These questions live quietly in the heart, long after the conversation ends. They echo, they heal. In the end, vague questions are not about vagueness at all. They're about trust. Trust that truth doesn't need to be dragged out. It only needs space. Trust that people already carry their answers inside them. Trust that silence and softness can do what precision never could. So ask slowly. Ask softly. Ask without needing to know right away. Let the question float between you and them, like a small light in the dark. Because sometimes, the most powerful questions are the ones that don't demand an answer. They awaken one. Using a confused look. Confusion, when used with intention, can be one of the most disarming tools in human interaction. It's soft, harmless, almost innocent, yet deeply powerful. Because when people think they know what to expect, and you quietly tilt that expectation off balance, their rhythm breaks. They pause. They reveal a confused look is more than an expression. It's a silent pause, a visual question that says, "Are you sure about that?" Without ever using words, it's a way of slowing the flow of conversation without resistance, of turning power gently in your direction. When you look confused, softly, naturally, the other person's brain immediately tries to fill the gap. They explain more, clarify, elaborate, and in doing so, they often reveal the truth they were trying to hide or didn't even realize they held. This is the quiet psychology behind it. The human mind hates ambiguity. When someone looks confused, the subconscious instinct is to resolve that confusion. It's not even a choice, it's a compulsion. The other person becomes eager to bring back clarity, and that eagerness exposes honesty. But the key to this subtle art lies in tone, not theatrical confusion, not exaggerated naivety, but soft curiosity. The look shouldn't mock or challenge. It should invite a small head tilt, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a pause before speaking. That's all it takes. In conversation, when someone says something complex, uncertain, or contradictory, your quiet confusion gives them space to think again. It mirrors their own subconscious doubts. They might correct themselves mid-sentence. "Well, actually, what I meant was," and in that moment, truth steps closer to the surface. Therapists, interviewers, and negotiators use this instinctively. Instead of confrontation, they use subtle uncertainty. They might raise an eyebrow or softly say, "I'm not sure I follow." It's not resistance, it's reflection. It helps people slow down and hear their own words echo back to them. There's something disarming about confusion that feels genuine. It removes threat. A confused person doesn't seem judgmental or combative. They seem open, curious, safe, and that's why people reveal more to them. Psychologically, a confused look lowers defenses. When someone feels understood too quickly, they stay guarded. But when you look slightly puzzled, they feel compelled to guide you, to explain. They move closer to you, emotionally and mentally. The power dynamic softens. Connection grows. Even in daily life, this works quietly. Imagine a moment when someone tries to impress, exaggerate, or intimidate. Instead of reacting, you simply tilt your head slightly, eyes calm, expression unreadable but gently confused. Suddenly, their energy falters. The overconfidence begins to crack. The silence they expected you to fill with awe, you fill with stillness. And that stillness makes them question themselves. Because the truth is, people gain power from reactions. When you respond instantly, they control the tempo. But when you respond with gentle confusion, no rush, no defense, you slow the tempo down. You take control of rhythm. But this technique isn't about manipulation. It's about awareness. A confused look can be a mirror, a quiet way of saying, "Something here doesn't align." It's a signal for deeper truth, not dominance. In emotional relationships, it can even heal misunderstandings. When someone says something hurtful, reacting angrily builds walls. But responding with a calm, slightly confused expression, "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," invites dialogue instead of destruction. It replaces accusation with curiosity. The difference is profound. Anger closes. Confusion opens. The art of using confusion wisely also depends on emotional neutrality. If your confusion carries frustration, it will sound like sarcasm. If it carries sincerity, it will sound like care. The eyes reveal the difference, the soft gaze of understanding versus the sharp stare of ego. In negotiation, a confused look can subtly shift control. When presented with an unreasonable demand or rush proposal, acting puzzled, not resistant, just uncertain, buys time. The other side begins to explain further, trying to convince you. And in convincing you, they often convince themselves to compromise. In communication, confusion slows things down, and slowness creates awareness. People rush through clarity. Confusion forces them to think. It's the moment where minds stop running ahead and begin actually listening. It's also deeply human, because confusion shows vulnerability. It says, I don't know everything, but I'm trying to understand. That kind of honesty builds bridges faster than any argument could. Children do this naturally. When they don't understand, they look up, eyes wide, eyebrows lifted, silently asking for explanation. And in that innocence, adults soften. They explain patiently, gently. That same energy, when carried into adult life, can dissolve tension instantly. The key is to keep that genuine softness alive. Even in storytelling or performance, confusion creates empathy. A character who doesn't know but wants to understand pulls the audience in. Because deep down, we all live inside questions we don't fully know how to answer. Confusion reminds us we're human, curious, learning, evolving. When used with intention, a confused look can also express humility. It tells others I don't assume, I listen. It invites them to unfold instead of defend. That invitation is rare, and therefore powerful. But there's a deeper layer to it, one that speaks not just to psychology, but to presence. When you look genuinely confused, you're actually listening. You're not waiting to speak. You're not reacting. You're absorbing. The body language of confusion, the still eyes, the slight pause, the head tilt, shows pure attention. And attention is the most healing thing you can offer another person. Confusion also creates connection through curiosity. It says, help me see what you see. It turns hierarchy into equality, because when you approach others, not as someone who knows, but as someone who's willing to learn, communication becomes collaboration. In spiritual terms, confusion is the beginning of wisdom. The wise never claim to know everything. They live in a gentle state of wonder. They carry that soft confusion like a lantern, lighting the path slowly as they walk. In a conversation, using a confused look communicates that same energy, the wisdom of humility. It reminds both people that understanding isn't instant, and truth unfolds only when you make space for it. But the real mastery lies in how you end the moment. You don't always need to clarify your confusion. Sometimes, leaving the question hanging is what brings truth forward. The other person, sensing your silence, fills it with explanation, with reflection, sometimes even with confession. So the next time someone's words feel uncertain or heavy, don't rush to correct or react. Just pause, breathe, let your face soften into quiet curiosity. Let confusion, genuine and calm, do what words cannot. Because confusion, when held with grace, doesn't create distance. It creates depth. It slows the world down just enough for truth to finally arrive. And in that soft, puzzled silence, you'll often find the clearest understanding of all. Starting with a small favor. Sometimes the smallest door opens the largest room, and sometimes the simplest request, a small favor, becomes the bridge between hesitation and trust. There is quiet genius in beginning with something small. A question, a gesture, a soft ask that seems harmless at first. Can you hold this for a second? Would you mind checking that for me? Could you help me with this one thing? It doesn't demand effort. It simply invites involvement. Yet beneath that simplicity lies something ancient and powerful, the psychology of connection. Humans are wired to build harmony through cooperation. Every time we help, no matter how small the act, our brains release signals of bonding and empathy. Helping someone, even in the smallest way, tells our subconscious, we're on the same side. That's the essence of starting with a small favor. It creates emotional momentum. Once someone takes the first small step toward helping, they're far more likely to continue walking beside you. Because people naturally want to stay consistent with their own behavior. If they said yes once, their mind prefers to stay aligned with that image of kindness. This is known as the foot in the door effect in psychology. But beyond the science, it's something deeply human. Cooperation feels good. Being needed feels good. Being trusted, even with something small, sparks a quiet sense of worth. Imagine you're meeting someone new. Instead of beginning with self-introduction or conversation, you gently ask, "Can you help me move this chair?" That one moment breaks the invisible wall between strangers. They feel useful. You seem approachable. What follows no longer feels like interaction between two separate people. It becomes a shared moment. Small favors build bridges that big conversations sometimes can't. But the key lies in sincerity. A small favor should never feel like a trick. It should feel natural, a gesture of connection, not manipulation. People can sense when a request carries warmth versus when it carries intention. One opens hearts, the other closes them. When used authentically, starting with a small favor is one of the most graceful ways to begin trust. It says, "I value you enough to invite you into my world, even just a little." Think about how relationships often begin, with little things. "Could you pass me that? Can you hold this? Mind if I borrow your pen?" These small asks begin to form threads between people, and with each one, connection strengthens. Not because of the favor itself, but because of the message it sends. You matter enough to be part of my moment. Even in leadership, this principle holds true. A good leader doesn't begin by demanding huge commitments. They begin by inviting small cooperation. "Can you share your thoughts on this idea? Could you help me review this?" When people say yes to small things, they begin to feel ownership of the larger purpose. They're no longer following, they're contributing. In friendships and love, starting small can also create warmth. When you ask for a tiny favor, like holding your cup, handing you something, or simply reminding you of a task, it creates gentle intimacy. It's not about need, it's about inclusion. The message is subtle but powerful. You're part of my space. Even spiritually, this principle echoes truth. Every great journey begins with a small step. Every transformation begins with a small shift. Asking for a little help is, in a way, asking life to participate with you, not to carry you, but to walk beside you. Small favors also disarm pride. Many people struggle to ask for help because they fear appearing weak. But a small favor is not weakness, it's humility in motion. It's the awareness that connection thrives not on independence, but on interdependence. When you ask gently, you give others a chance to express kindness, and in doing so, they become emotionally invested in your well-being. That's why small acts of cooperation lead to big trust. Helping once makes the heart want to help again. But there's another layer, deeper and more emotional. When you ask for a small favor, you're saying, "I trust you." And that trust, even unspoken, is magnetic. It makes people feel seen, capable, respected. It reminds them of their goodness. Imagine walking down a street and a stranger stops you, not for money, not for help, but simply to ask, "Could you tell me which way this street goes?" You stop, you help, you smile. For a brief second, you're connected. That's what small favors do. They turn strangers into participants in the same story. And if you notice carefully, this principle isn't just about human connection, it's how life itself works. The universe begins everything small. A seed becomes a tree, a spark becomes a flame, a whisper becomes a song. All growth starts with something tiny, almost invisible, yet full of potential. Starting with a small favor follows that same rhythm. It respects timing. It builds trust slowly, organically. It doesn't rush the heart or force understanding. It lets connection bloom at its natural pace. But small favors should always come with gratitude. The moment someone says yes, even for something tiny, acknowledge it, not with grand words, but with genuine warmth. "Thank you, that really helped." Those few words multiply the effect of the moment. Gratitude turns transaction into emotion. There's also beauty in the reciprocity that follows. When you ask for a small favor, it often creates an invisible promise that you'll be there for them too. This unspoken exchange is the foundation of all meaningful relationships. Give, receive, repeat. In conversations, this method can also ease tension. When a discussion feels cold or distant, asking a simple favor, "Can you hand me that?" gently resets the emotional tone. It brings the other person's body and energy into motion with yours. Suddenly, the distance shrinks. Cooperation returns. Psychologically, this small moment of collaboration synchronizes nervous systems. It shifts the brain's focus from defense to connection. What was two separate energies becomes one shared rhythm. So whether it's between lovers, friends, colleagues, or strangers, starting small holds quiet magic. It's the whisper that begins the symphony, the first stone that builds the bridge. Because connection rarely begins with grand gestures. It begins with something simple, one hand reaching for another, one small favor asked and given, one silent moment of shared trust. So the next time you meet someone new, or want to rebuild an old connection, or even seek peace in tension, start small. Ask softly, invite gently, because every great bond, every moment of understanding begins with the same simple act. One soul asking another, "Can you help me?" And the answer, whispered in kindness, "Of course." Maintaining neutral expressions. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from words. It lives in the face, in the stillness of the eyes, in the calm of the mouth, in the serenity between emotion and reaction. That's where presence truly begins. To maintain a neutral expression is not to be cold or distant. It's to be centered. It's the art of holding space between feeling and showing, between impulse and awareness. It's saying to the world, "I'm here, but I'm not swept away." When your expression remains calm, people see steadiness. Even if they don't understand it, they feel it before they interpret it. Because the human mind is wired to read faces before words. Every flicker, every twitch, every tightening of muscle tells a story. When you master that story, when your face tells peace instead of panic, you control not just perception, but energy. Neutrality is misunderstood. Many think it means emptiness, but in truth, it's balance. It's the midpoint between joy and anger, between fear and excitement. It's where emotion passes through without leaving a mark. Maintaining a neutral expression doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means guiding it. You still feel deeply, but your face becomes a mirror rather than a billboard. It reflects understanding, not reaction. It tells others, "I'm listening, I'm processing, I'm not lost in the moment." Imagine a tense conversation. Someone raises their voice, emotions rising like a wave. Most people mirror that energy. Brows tighten, lips press, eyes harden. But if your expression remains still, not blank, but calm, it sends a signal stronger than any word. "I'm not entering your storm." That calmness can shift the entire rhythm. It invites others to meet your pace instead of pulling you into theirs. Because emotion is contagious, but so is composure. Psychologically, this practice stabilizes both sides of a conversation. The human nervous system is attuned to faces. It constantly scans for cues of safety or danger. When your face stays relaxed, you signal safety. The other person's nervous system begins to mirror that calmness. What could have become conflict instead becomes clarity. In leadership, maintaining neutral expressions is a quiet form of power. It communicates control without effort. When others are uncertain, they look for stability. A calm face, steady eyes, relaxed jaw, soft breath becomes that anchor. Even in performance or storytelling, the greatest actors understand the power of stillness. A neutral face doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening beneath the surface. The audience feels the storm behind the stillness. That's what makes it compelling. The same applies in life. When you stay calm outwardly, even as emotions swirl inside, people sense your depth. They can feel the silent strength that doesn't need to perform. That is real influence, quiet, patient, profound. But there's a difference between neutrality and numbness. Numbness is the absence of feeling. Neutrality is the mastery of it. It's the difference between freezing emotion and flowing through it. Neutrality breathes. It's alive, aware, present. To maintain a neutral expression, you must first learn to breathe through emotion rather than react to it. When something triggers you, anger, surprise, sadness, take a slow breath before your face responds. Feel the emotion rise and fall without letting it command your muscles. Your face becomes a lake, not a storm. The emotion passes. The reflection remains clear. This practice doesn't just influence others, it transforms you. The more you stay physically calm, the more your mind mirrors that calm. The body tells the brain, "We are safe." And when the brain believes that, your entire presence changes. Think about how monks, diplomats, or wise elders seem to carry serenity even in chaos. Their faces rarely show extremes, yet you never mistake it for emptiness. It feels like depth, because they've learned that true communication doesn't always need visible reaction. Presence speaks through stillness. Maintaining neutrality also sharpens perception. When you stop expressing every thought on your face, you begin noticing more in others. You read micro-expressions, subtle hesitations, small signals that were invisible before. Because your focus shifts from broadcasting emotion to receiving it. This is why therapists often keep their expressions neutral, not because they don't feel empathy, but because they want to create space for others to express freely. If they looked shocked, judgmental, or overly emotional, the client would withdraw. Neutrality becomes a safe mirror for honesty. In relationships, this same calmness creates understanding. When your partner or friend is upset, and you stay present without reacting, you offer comfort. You tell them, through your face, you don't have to match chaos with chaos. I can hold this space for both of us. Neutral expression also has roots in self-discipline. The ancient Stoics practiced apatheia, not apathy, but emotional balance. They believed that peace comes from controlling the response, not the world. Maintaining calm facial expressions was part of that philosophy, training the mind by training the body. But like all things powerful, this art must come from sincerity. If neutrality feels forced, it becomes cold. If it comes from awareness, it becomes grace. The difference lies in the heart. When your calmness comes from compassion, people feel peace. When it comes from suppression, they feel distance. So practice not through rigidity, but through awareness. Notice how your face reacts when emotions rise. Notice the small habits. The frown that forms, the lip that tightens, the brow that lifts. And when you catch them, soften. Not hide, soften. Your eyes are especially important. A neutral expression doesn't mean blank eyes. Let them stay warm, steady, kind. Let your calmness carry empathy, not emptiness. Because true neutrality doesn't erase emotion. It holds it gently. Even in silence, the face speaks. When it speaks with balance, it brings peace. In the end, maintaining a neutral expression is not about hiding. It's about revealing something deeper. Control, awareness, compassion, patience. It's the face of someone who listens before judging, breathes before reacting, and feels without being overwhelmed. So the next time the world tests your calm, when words sting, when tempers rise, when uncertainty stirs, let your face become still. Let it be the quiet in the room that others anchor to. Because neutrality, when held with kindness, isn't detachment. It's presence. It's the art of being unshaken, yet fully awake. And in a world of overreaction, that kind of calm is unforgettable. Light nodding. Sometimes the simplest movements carry the greatest meaning. A single nod, small, subtle, almost imperceptible, can shift an entire moment. It can calm a storm, build trust, open hearts, or silently say, I understand. Light nodding is one of the quietest forms of communication and one of the most powerful. It's a bridge between silence and speech, a soft rhythm that says more than words could. When done gently, with awareness, it turns listening into connection. Every nod has energy. Too fast and it feels impatient. Too slow and it feels mechanical. But a light nod, natural, steady, timed with understanding, carries sincerity. It tells the speaker that you're not just hearing them, you're feeling their meaning. Humans have been nodding for thousands of years. It's universal. Across cultures, languages, and borders, the nod says yes. It says agreement, empathy, encouragement. Even infants, before they can talk, respond to the rhythm of nodding. The body understands it before the mind learns it. That's because nodding mirrors breathing. The subtle rise and fall, the pulse of life itself. When someone speaks, and you nod lightly, you create harmony. You tell them, keep going, I'm with you. It reassures them that they're not speaking into emptiness. It builds trust, not through grand gestures, but through the smallest motion of acknowledgement. Psychologically, nodding is reinforcement. It rewards expression. The human mind thrives on feedback. It wants to know it's being received. When that validation comes silently, it feels even more genuine. Words can flatter. Presence cannot fake. But light nodding is not about performance. It must come from presence. A mechanical nod, one done out of habit, loses power. True nodding begins in the eyes before it reaches the neck. The gaze softens. The head dips slightly, almost unconsciously. That's the nod that carries warmth. The kind that says, I'm not just agreeing, I'm understanding you. In conversation, this technique shapes rhythm. The speaker feels your attention and slows down. The dialogue becomes less of a monologue, more of a dance. Each nod becomes a step, a beat, guiding the tempo of connection. Even in silence, a nod can speak entire sentences. In crowded rooms, across distances, among strangers, a light nod can say thank you, I see you, or it's okay. It transcends language because it's not built from words. It's built from empathy. Leaders, mentors, and listeners of wisdom all use this instinctively. When someone speaks from the heart, the listener nods gently, not to agree blindly, but to hold space. That motion says, I respect your experience, even if I don't fully understand it yet. Therapists and mediators master this skill. They know that nodding too much feels artificial, but nodding lightly at key emotional points gives safety. It says, you're safe to continue. You're not alone in this. In relationships, light nodding is one of love's quiet languages. When your partner shares something vulnerable, not seeking solutions, only understanding, the nod is everything. Its presence turned visible. It's the body saying what the heart already knows. Even in moments of conflict, a light nod can change everything. When someone is upset and you nod softly, even before speaking, it tells them, I hear you. I'm not fighting your feeling. That acknowledgement can diffuse anger faster than logic ever could. Because emotion doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be felt. The art of nodding lies in sincerity, but also in restraint. Too much movement breaks calm. The nod must match the tone, slow, quiet, deliberate. It should feel like a ripple in still water, not a wave. Notice how your body feels when you nod lightly. The muscles around your neck relax. Your breath deepens. The act itself slows you down. You begin to listen differently, not just with your ears, but with your presence. In communication, people often underestimate listening. They think speaking holds power, but it's the listener who shapes the space. Light nodding transforms you from a passive receiver to an active presence. It tells the world, I'm not just here, I'm here with awareness. Even in teaching or storytelling, the audience's nods guide the rhythm. A storyteller knows when to pause, when to continue, when the words have landed, all through those subtle movements. The nod is the unspoken applause between sentences. Spiritually, nodding holds symbolism too. It's a gesture of humility, the head bowing slightly, the self softening. It's an ancient movement of surrender, not in weakness, but in wisdom. It says, I'm open, I'm listening, I accept. Imagine two monks in silence sitting across from each other. No words, no gestures, just the occasional nod. That's enough, because truth doesn't always need conversation. Sometimes it only needs acknowledgement. In our fast world, filled with interruptions, nodding reminds us to slow down, to listen not to reply, but to understand, to meet every word with quiet acceptance before judgment arises. There's also self-nodding, a small act of affirmation you can give yourself. When doubt whispers or life feels heavy, nod softly. Not to the world, but to your own being. It's a physical way of saying, I trust myself. I'm still here, because nodding, at its deepest, isn't about agreement. It's about harmony. It's saying yes, not just to others, but to the present moment. So when you next find yourself in conversation, practice awareness through this tiny gesture. Don't overthink it. Let your nod come naturally, softly, as if your breath itself were guiding it. Because sometimes, a single nod can do what an entire speech cannot. It can calm, connect, and comfort, without a single word being spoken. Placing an object between you. Sometimes we protect ourselves not with words, but with space. Not with distance measured in miles, but with something small. A cup, a book, a phone, a notebook, a table, an object placed quietly between two people, carrying all the unspoken emotions that neither side dares to name. It's a simple action, almost invisible, yet deeply telling. Psychologists call it a barrier gesture, a subconscious way to create safety. But beneath the science lies something more human, the silent art of emotional boundaries. When two people talk, the invisible current between them matters as much as the words. It's energy, eye contact, posture, breath, presence. And when that current feels too intense, too uncertain, or too revealing, the instinct to place something between you is the body's way of saying, I need a little protection. Just for now. The beauty of this gesture is that it's not rejection, it's balance. The object becomes a soft wall, not to block connection, but to manage it, to regulate closeness, to slow down the exchange so both hearts can breathe. Think of how someone holds a cup during a deep conversation, fingers wrapped tightly, the cup lifted between them and the other person. They sip slowly, eyes shifting, words gentle. The cup isn't just holding a drink. It's holding emotion. It's a buffer that allows vulnerability without collapse. Or picture a person at a cafe, speaking with someone new. Their phone lies on the table, screen down, centered between them. They don't touch it, yet its presence divides the space. A silent signal. I'm here, but not completely open yet. That object becomes a quiet symbol of safety, a boundary that feels manageable. We all do this, often without realizing it. We fold our arms across our chest. We hold a bag in front of us. We clutch a pen. These small actions are the body's language of containment. It says, I'm here, but I'm choosing the pace of my openness. Psychologically, placing an object between yourself and another person can serve two purposes: comfort and control. Comfort, because it gives the body a sense of security. Control, because it allows you to manage energy without confrontation. In intense discussions, especially emotional ones, this instinct can prevent overwhelm. When feelings rise, and you feel the pressure of being seen too closely, the object gives you something to hold on to, a grounding point. It helps anchor you back to presence. But like all tools of psychology, the power lies in awareness. When done unconsciously, this habit can become a barrier that keeps connection out. But when done consciously, it becomes a gentle form of emotional intelligence, a way of creating healthy space without hurting anyone. In relationships, this awareness can make communication more compassionate. If you notice yourself clutching an object, ask silently, what am I protecting right now? Maybe it's your vulnerability. Maybe it's fear of judgment. Maybe it's the part of you that doesn't yet know how to express something. By noticing, you begin to soften. The object doesn't need to disappear immediately. It simply transforms from a shield into a reminder that you're allowed to take your time. Sometimes, placing something between you and another person is an act of tenderness. Imagine a couple sitting quietly at a table. Between them, a candle. Its soft light flickers, illuminating both faces, but giving them a shared focus. They speak, pause, breathe. The flame becomes their emotional middle ground, a safe space for both to meet. The same happens in friendship. Sharing food, passing a cup, sliding a photograph across a table. All of these are gentle ways of using objects not to divide, but to connect safely. The object carries the emotion that words struggle to express. In therapy rooms, chairs are placed just far enough apart, and a table often rests between them. Not to separate, but to create structure. Because safety breeds honesty. The mind opens only when it feels protected. Even in ancient traditions, objects have been used to bridge unseen energies. Rituals use candles, stones, or bowls of water between teacher and student, not as walls, but as vessels of intention. The object absorbs what words cannot. But there's also power in letting go of the object when the moment feels right. Imagine two people in deep conversation. One has been holding a cup tightly. Then slowly they set it down. Their hands rest open on the table. That small motion, so subtle, signals a shift. It says, I trust you now. The invisible wall dissolves. The air softens. Placing an object between you can also be a form of mindfulness. It brings your awareness into the present, something physical to focus on when emotions begin to rise. Instead of reacting, you hold the object, grounding your thoughts in the now. The texture, the weight, the temperature, all bring you back to your body. In negotiation or leadership, objects often serve similar roles. A notebook, a laptop, a cup. They form subtle boundaries that define personal space. Great communicators use them consciously, not to exclude, but to set tone. The space between becomes respectful, balanced, composed. But the real mastery lies not in the object itself, but in the awareness of why it's there. Because once you understand that, you gain emotional clarity. You begin to recognize when it's time to keep that space and when it's time to let it go. Sometimes, after trust deepens, you move the object aside without even noticing. You lean closer. The conversation breathes easier. The energy flows naturally. That's how connection evolves. One layer at a time, one invisible wall slowly fading into warmth. And sometimes the opposite is true. You introduce an object to protect peace. During conflict, placing something like a notebook, a coffee mug, or even folded hands between yourself and the other person can prevent emotional overflow. It's not withdrawal, it's wisdom. It's saying, I'm here, but I need a little space to stay kind. The gesture is ancient, instinctive, and deeply human. It's our way of balancing closeness and safety, vulnerability and strength. So the next time you find yourself placing an object between you and someone else, don't rush to remove it. Don't judge it. Simply notice it. Feel what it's doing, protecting, comforting, balancing. Then decide consciously whether that space still serves you. Because in the quiet dance of human connection, even the smallest object can become part of the story. The candle between two souls, the cup that held both warmth and distance, the notebook that carried the words too heavy to speak. And when the time is right, when trust has softened the air, you'll find your hand moving that object aside. No words needed, just a shared silence, a steady breath, and the realization that sometimes the space we create was never meant to separate us, only to prepare us for closeness. Breaking eye contact suddenly. There's a silence that happens not when words stop, but when eyes look away. It's the quiet between connection and distance, between presence and retreat. Breaking eye contact suddenly is one of the most delicate moments in human interaction. It's small in movement, yet vast in meaning. Eyes are our first language. Before speech, before understanding, there was gaze, the simple meeting of sight between beings. It's through the eyes that we learn to trust, to love, to recognize emotion. And so, when that connection breaks, even for a heartbeat, the world between two people shifts. When someone breaks eye contact suddenly, the mind takes notice. A spark of curiosity, sometimes even tension, flickers. What caused it? Was it shyness, discomfort, guilt, or reflection? The human brain is wired to interpret meaning in every glance, especially in every glance that ends too soon. But the act itself isn't always negative. In truth, breaking eye contact can be a subtle form of emotional regulation. When we feel seen too deeply, too fast, the gaze becomes heavy. The eyes can feel like open windows to the soul. And not every soul is ready for that kind of exposure. Looking away becomes a breath, a way to process the energy flowing between two people. Sometimes, the break is instinctive, a momentary pause when feelings rise too quickly. Affection, fear, vulnerability or memory. The eyes lower, shift or wander, not to hide, but to find balance. The gaze returns when safety returns. In conversation, sudden breaks in eye contact reveal more than the dialogue itself. They show where emotion outweighs control. For example, someone may speak confidently, maintaining strong eye contact until they mention a personal topic. Suddenly, their eyes flicker downward just for a second. That pause, that subtle retreat, holds truth. Words cannot carry. Psychologists study these micro moments to understand unspoken emotion. A shift in gaze can mean discomfort or introspection. But when the break feels calm rather than abrupt, when it flows naturally, it signals thoughtfulness, not avoidance. Because maintaining constant eye contact isn't natural. Even the most connected people need to look away to think, to rest, to feel. The eyes are extensions of the nervous system. They mirror our inner world. When emotion becomes too strong, the body instinctively seeks to regulate it. Looking away is that regulation, a soft way to stay grounded. There's a rhythm to all human connection: meeting, pausing, retreating, returning. Breaking eye contact suddenly is part of that rhythm. It creates contrast. Without it, gaze becomes overwhelming, even invasive. But with it, the dance of connection feels real. Imagine two people in quiet conversation. Their eyes meet, and for a few seconds there's stillness. Then one looks away, gently, almost in thought. That moment of disconnection is not a rejection. It's a breath. It gives space for emotion to settle, for energy to circulate. When the eyes meet again, the bond feels deeper, not weaker. In relationships, this pattern reveals emotional honesty. Lovers who can hold eye contact but also break it when needed understand balance. They know that intensity must breathe, that even love needs pauses between heartbeats. In social interaction, breaking eye contact suddenly can also shape perception. Too little eye contact may appear insecure. Too much may seem intimidating. The key lies in awareness, knowing when to look, when to release, when to return. Those who master this balance exude presence without pressure. Leaders, negotiators, and speakers often use eye contact deliberately, to engage, to emphasize, to connect. But they also know when to look away, to shift energy, to reset attention. These pauses make connection more human, more believable. Without breaks, eye contact becomes performance. With breaks, it becomes presence. On a deeper level, the way we handle eye contact reflects our comfort with vulnerability. Some people find direct gaze overwhelming because it feels like exposure, as if every thought could be seen. Others find peace in it, a sense of unity. Breaking gaze suddenly can be a reflex of self-protection, the soul closing its window for a moment to regain privacy. And yet sometimes, that very break can create mystery. When someone looks away mid-sentence, not nervously, but softly, the listener's attention sharpens. It's as if the silence between eyes holds a secret waiting to be felt, not explained. There's beauty in that unspoken tension, because communication isn't about uninterrupted attention. It's about the ebb and flow of awareness. You don't stare at the sun continuously. You return to it in moments, each time reminded of its light. When you look away, you allow space for thought, for emotion, for reflection. It's the pause between music notes that makes melody breathe. In the same way, the momentary break in eye contact gives the connection rhythm and life. In mindfulness, this act holds symbolic meaning. It represents detachment without disconnection, the ability to stay aware of another's presence while still honoring your own inner world. You can look away and still be deeply connected. The mistake many make is to associate breaking eye contact with weakness. But in truth, it's a skill of emotional regulation. Knowing when to look away is as important as knowing when to meet the gaze again. It's a gesture of respect to the self and to the other person. Children often look away when they're processing emotions. When they feel shy, embarrassed, or overwhelmed by praise, they avert their gaze. It's not avoidance. It's the natural rhythm of feeling. Adults forget this rhythm, mistaking intensity for authenticity. But balance, not intensity, creates connection that lasts. There's also an art to how you break eye contact. Abruptness creates tension. Gentleness maintains warmth. Looking down softly or to the side in reflection carries calm energy. Snapping the eyes away, on the other hand, signals resistance or fear. Awareness of this difference turns a simple motion into emotional mastery. In moments of silence, breaking eye contact can even deepen connection. Imagine two people sitting quietly, eyes meeting, then one looking away to the horizon. That motion shifts the energy from you and me to us and the world. It expands the space of awareness, because connection doesn't end when the eyes part. It continues in what lingers. The echo of gaze, the memory of that shared attention, remains like warmth after light fades. To understand someone's soul, you must watch not just how they look, but how they look away. In those quiet shifts, you see honesty, you see humanity. So the next time someone breaks eye contact with you suddenly, don't take it as withdrawal. See it as rhythm, the natural breath of emotional connection. A moment for their heart to realign before returning to you. And when you find yourself needing to look away, do it softly, with awareness. Let your gaze drift naturally. Let your breath follow. Then, when you look back, do so not out of obligation, but out of peace. Because true connection doesn't require constant staring. It lives in the spaces between the meeting, the retreat, the return, and sometimes the most meaningful gaze is not the one held the longest, but the one that always finds its way back. Now that you've reached the end of this quiet journey, pause, breathe. Think about how much power lives in the smallest things. A glance, a nod, a moment of silence, a gentle shift in body language. None of them shout, none of them demand attention, yet they speak the language of trust, emotion, and understanding more clearly than any words ever could. You now carry that awareness, the ability to read the invisible, to move through conversations with grace, to listen with your whole presence. Use it with care, use it with heart. Because the moment you understand how energy flows between people, you realize connection was never about control. It was always about awareness. In every interaction from this day forward, remember, your stillness can calm chaos. Your silence can hold meaning. Your presence can heal. So walk into the world quietly powerful. Notice the way people move, the rhythm in their voices, the spaces between their words. And when you see these signs, the body mirroring, the eyes meeting, the pauses and gestures, smile softly. Because now you understand. Let every word, every motion, every moment you share become part of this greater awareness. A quiet mastery of connection, empathy, and peace. And if these insights have opened something within you, Don't just keep them. Live them, practice them, share them, because the world doesn't need louder voices. It needs calmer hearts. So take a deep breath, lift your eyes, and step forward with quiet strength. Because sometimes the most powerful presence in the room is the one that doesn't need to say a word.